We are ready to start whenever you are.
Oh, hold on, let me grab a picture.
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
All right, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And before we do that, we will hear from instructions on how the public may access Spanish interpretation.
Thank you. The following message will repeat in Spanish. We are offering live interpretation in Spanish via our Zoom platform. To access our Spanish channel, press the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, where you will see a globe icon. Choose Spanish. If you're joining via Zoom smartphone app, select your language by clicking More, or the three dots at the bottom of your screen. Select Language Interpretation and choose Spanish. Bienvenidos. Estamos ofreciendo interpretación en español en vivo y en directo durante nuestra sesión en la plataforma Zoom. Para tener acceso a interpretación, oprima el icono del globo terráqueo al pie de su pantalla y seleccione Spanish o español según su formato. Si está uniéndose a nosotros vía Zoom en su teléfono inteligente, seleccione los tres puntitos al pie de su pantalla, elija Interpretación de idiomas y presione Spanish o español. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Mayor. Back to you.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to our land acknowledgement. The City of South Lake Tahoe acknowledges the lands we occupy today are the lands in the home of the Washoe. The people here from here known today as the Washoe tribe of Nevada and California, a sovereign nation. Since the beginning of time and for thousands of years before the arrival of any other people, the Washoe lived here and cared for this place, with values and intention that we can all learn from. On behalf of the City Council, I would like to acknowledge, thank, and honor the indigenous Washoe tribal communities that are the past, present, and future stewards of the Lake Tahoe Basin. And with that, we'll move on to our Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and we'll take the roll call.
Thank you. Councilmember Robbins.
Here.
Councilmember Wallace.
Here.
Councilmember Cregan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedrich.
Here. Here.
Mayor Bass.
Here.
All present.
Great, and with that, we'll go to a closed session report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had one item on closed session this morning. It was a workers' compensation appeals board case regarding Hildardo Navarro, and there's no reportable action.
Great. All right, and so move on to public communications. This is the public's opportunity to speak on any topic not listed on this agenda. Comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. In accordance with the Brown Act, the City Council cannot deliberate or vote on any matter raised under public communications, but may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed. And with that, we'll open up public comment for anybody in the room. Yes, come forward and state your name, please.
Hi, everyone. Stacy Ballard. I'm just here to represent the Act Commission and accessibility if you have any questions going through the budget on either of those subjects. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ballard. Anybody else in the room? Yes, Shadar Edelman.
Good morning. Shadar Edelman. I'm the new Vice President General Manager at Heavenly Mountain Resort. Very happy to be back in the Tahoe area, getting to know this community, this team, and this operation. Thanks for the time today. I'm here today regarding Heavenly Mountain's parking operations. In your recent council meeting, you stated you are moving forward with expenses related to parking enforcement in the area of the city near the resort. I request that instead of incurring this expense, you direct staff to negotiate a renewed parking agreement with the resort that can eliminate additional taxpayer expense, add revenue to the city, and support continuation of the successful partnership we have had managing parking and snow removal in that area. Instead of building on these successes that you have also praised publicly, the city is now proposing using taxpayer dollars to deliberately damage proven success by blocking parking and increasing congestion. As we heard at the recent Tahoe Summit, cross-border collaboration is critical to our community success. While we are outside the city boundary, we are an important member of and contributor to this community and our shared success. I ask that this critical issue be considered accordingly. I am a new partner in this incredible community, and I hope the city will continue to collaborate with the resort in addressing issues with positive intent and in service to the community as we have done for so many years. We ask that the city work with us to come to a new parking agreement and not spend taxpayer dollars to deliberately harm what has been effective collaboration with positive results. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Edelman. Anybody else in the room that would like to give public comment on anything not listed on the agenda? Mr. Kurzweiler.
Good morning. A little story and a little history on our life, the good, the bad, and the ugly in our life here in Tahoe. The good. I met my wife here. I got married at Vikingsholm Castle and I've been married for 43 years. We've raised 3 kids who were all born at Barton. We've established K&K services and have been serving South Lake Tahoe for 43 years. We built our dream home and have established roots here. Through the years, our company has donated over $250,000 to our community through volunteer labor, firewood donations, or just plain cash. I joined the military and served my country for just over 20 years and retired a major. My son joined the Navy and participated in the War on Terror just after 9/11. We have never turned anyone away that needed help. Even those that bagged on me over the years, we have helped. I also joined a motorcycle club that has donated over $20,000 to Christmas cheer through toy runs and events. I retired from them over 11 years ago when I ran for supervisor. I have always been here for my community and will always answer all calls. I love this community and hope to die here. Like a lot of people, we have had our bad times. These are the bad times. During the downfall of the economy starting in 2008, we have had a series of problems, our family. In 2010, we lost both of my wife's parents. Our dog got hit and passed that we'd had for 13 years. I built a commercial, residential, multi-use, multi-family building in Myers that was our retirement. The TRPA even gave us an award for creativity and innovation. We lost that along with our life savings and all of our credit cards, and we were about to lose our home. That year, we also lost our son, Caleb. We had a family meeting and voted to stay. The following year, I lost a daughter from a previous relationship. She was in the Nevada National Guard, and we spent 10 great years together. She was shot and killed in Carson City by a South Lake Tahoe resident at the IHOP restaurant. I was honored to be able to place a gold star wreath at a ceremony in Arlington, Virginia on the tomb of the unknown soldier. My wife was diagnosed with MS and recently had breast cancer. Both have been taken care of. I recently got prostate cancer and that has been taken care of. I ran for supervisor and the reaction and abuse I received during those times has taken a toll on our family. The lies and rumors were almost too much to take. I have been called a racist, a Nazi, a Confederate flag-waving member of the Proud Boys, a homophobic, and have been accused of several other nasty things. This was from friends and people I've known for over 35 years and have helped out several times. That hurt, but we still hung in there. And I still love this community and continue to help this community and even those that have turned on our family. Whenever anyone asks me how I'm doing, the answer is always the same, as everybody can attest. If I was any better, I wouldn't know what the hell to do with myself. And now we got the ugly. The only service club I ever joined in this community was the American Legion. I did not join any other because I wanted to be fair and equal to everyone through my donations and support. I was planning on attending the upcoming 9/11 ceremony and presenting a shadow box, which used to be on the wall over there, commemorating 9/11. The fire department had it the first year, and Lake Valley has it this year, and it's going back to the city fire department to be there. I have just been informed by the American Legion commander that I cannot attend the ceremony due to my prior affiliations. If I show up, I will be escorted off the property. I am not allowed to renew my membership, which I am currently a member, I am not a member of the American Legion because I haven't paid my dues, but I was a member of the American Legion, or attend any events, 9/11, Veterans Day, or Memorial Day, where I honor my son and daughter. My family has given quite a bit for this country and this community. The sacrifices we have made are above and beyond anything we have ever imagined. There have been several times that we wanted to throw in the towel and start over somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Kurzweiler. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kurzweiler. Yes, Mr. Messina.
John Messina for TahoeTaxpayers.com. A terrible fraud has been perpetrated on the residents of South Lake Tahoe. Residents with more than one home have been misled about the legality of registering to vote at their Tahoe residence. Several journalists and 2 politicians have been pretending to be attorneys and illegally giving out false legal advice by telling residents who were legally qualified to vote that only full-time residents could register and vote here. The first rule of journalism is to check your facts, but Mountain News has failed to do that repeatedly and spread misinformation that negatively impacted both the 2018 Measure T election and possibly this November 5th election. Except for this information Mountain News has again dredged up this misinformation to intimidate voters who have owned residents here from voting against Measure N vacancy tax. The Mountain News has been given the facts validated by the recent letter from the El Dorado District Attorney Office, and they still continue to refuse to print a retraction or correction. If the author had actually been an attorney, they would have discovered that the legal citations being quoted were obsolete. Those laws were superseded by Help America Vote Act, signed into law by President George W. Bush in 2002, 16 years before they distributed the false information. An August 8th, 2024 letter from the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office finally clarifies that voters with more than one residence can choose which one they want to vote at. The requirement to register and vote here is to have their driver's license and vehicles registered at their South Lake Tahoe residence and no other residents receiving a homeowner's tax credit. The city should put a referendum on the ballot so we can have a fair and honest vote on Measure T, not tainted by lies from our media, and take measures to ensure voters have the correct information before the November election so that they can legally vote where they're authorized to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Messina. Anybody else in the room that would like to give public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move to our Zoom platform.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and open up our Zoom platform for anyone who wants to provide public comment on any topic not on today's agenda. We have Kelly O'Hare.
Hi, good morning. I want to speak to you about a city road project that was on Saddle Road. About 2 months ago, the construction company dropped off a porta potty across the street from my house, and the road workers used it for about a month. They left it behind for about 6 weeks after they finished the project. We regularly have kids here partying across the street in the forest land, and they knocked it over. And there's been a hazmat spill now. It's on part on forest land and part on the street roadway. Yesterday, I called the Department of Public Works 3 times. I left 2 messages. No one called back. I finally found another number and spoke to someone who told me that it was for another project. Now, live here, he's not here, but on the telephone, he told me that this was another project, and it's not another project. It's a city project. I can see it from my window. I've watched it go on for 2 months. It's a hazmat spill. It's part on forest land, and someone needs to come clean it up. And I think this is sort of consistent with my experience with other issues with the city. Most of those have been with the law enforcement. But in the past, I've confronted a group of 4 boys that were across the street from my house dumping a large motor that they had to lift out of the trunk of a car. I got the license plate. I called the police department. They came and told me that they could not investigate it because the license plate was from Nevada. And I know that's not true. Another similar issue, a business owner called me because he had a $400,000 embezzlement from his business. And these were deposits on security deposits for rentals in South Lake Tahoe. The police department told them they were too busy to take that report, and that they would, and when they went out, they suggested it was a civil matter. I called the county district attorney's office and asked if they had a real estate fraud grant, which I thought they probably did. They did. They came out, they investigated the case. The person went to prison. It was over $400,000 of funds that were stolen from deposits left on rentals here in the area. Anyway, my point being, like, this just can't be how city government works, that we call for help and the answer is that it's a civil matter or someone else's fault. So the spill is still out there across the street from my house. The size of it is larger than the outhouse or the porta potty that was knocked over. So I'm hoping that someone can come clean it up. They've got my name, my phone number, and my address. I called 3 times, and the answer was that it was probably somebody else or some other project, but it's not. It was a city road project. So I'd really like someone to look into that. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, next up we have Miss Reagan. Miss
Hello?
Reagan, go ahead.
Okay. Hi there. The City of South Lake Tahoe recently had a survey rating the livability of the city. These items have been neglected in the city and the budget, and I'm asking you to give extra consideration to these items today and also as you move forward in your strategic plan. The recent survey rated excellent or good, 23% for economic health, 36% for community design, 42% for inclusivity and engagement, 48% for education, arts and culture, and 3% for availability of affordable housing. Also, just a reminder that the ADA was made law 34 years ago, and it's time to make Tahoe more accessible, inclusive, and kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reagan. There's no additional public comments at this time.
Great, thanks. I think I will respond just to the Heavenly comments for the public. We've been for over a year now been waiting for a response from Heavenly on if they will support annexation of the Cal Main Lodge parcel or the entire mountain into the city of South Lake Tahoe. The parking arrangement is basically based upon if the Heavenly will be part of the city and wants to be part of the city, we can absolutely work forward into a parking arrangement. But without that, we are not going to be talking about a parking arrangement. However, the invitation is open for Heavenly to decide and give us a clear answer if they want to be part of the city or not. I think we demonstrated very well last year that what that partnership can do for solutions on Ski Run, and it's much more than just a parking arrangement. So. With that, we will go ahead and move on to our consent.
City Commission reports real quick.
Excuse me, moving too fast. Any commissioners that are in the room? Mr. Gregorich? Nope. All right. Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to our consent agenda. Anybody in the room that wants to pull an item? Seeing none, we will go ahead and open up the consent agenda for public comment. Anybody in the room for public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to Zoom.
Yeah, we'll open up our Zoom platform for anyone who wants to provide public comment on today's consent agenda. No public comments, Mayor.
All right, looking for a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, we can vote.
Okay, and with Mr. Friedrich participating remotely, we will do a verbal vote. Councilmember Robbins.
Aye.
Councilmember Wallace.
Aye.
Councilmember Cregan.
Aye.
Mayor Bass.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedrich.
Aye.
That unanimously carries. Thank you.
Great. All right. So before we move to regular new business, we only have one item today with our budget. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will be back here. Actually, we'll take an 8-minute break. We will be back here at 9:30.
Okay, Mayor, we're ready to get going whenever you are.
Great. We will go ahead and call this meeting back to order. Our regular new business, item 5, fiscal year 2024-2025 recommended budget, and this will be Ms. Tika Marolos.
Good morning, Mayor Bass, members of the City Council. For the record, I'm Olga Tikhamirova, Director of Finance, and today I will be presenting to you the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025. Before I begin, I just wanted to mention that please feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions during the budget presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. The budget has been prepared based to include funding for City Council strategic priorities. That was one of the focus points for the staff, and a different level of funding is included in the proposed budget for each of these 5 strategic priorities. Briefly again about our budget process. It takes approximately 6 months to prepare the budget. We start in April and we send out requests to the departments, request forms. We prepare position salaries distribution, position budgeting. We request to prepare 5-year CIP plan. And we collect the data in May, and we have meetings with the department heads and city manager in June to review their budgets. Then in July, the budget is compiled, and in August, it's presented to City Council. One of the documents on the agenda is the resolution to adopt 2025 municipal and operating and capital improvement budget. And if council so desires, and if there are no changes, the budget can be adopted today. Some general information about the city's budget and budget approach for public benefit. The city adopts an annual budget for 1 fiscal year. The city's fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th. The budget is, along with presenting the budget for the upcoming year, we incorporate a long-term perspective into our budget using a 5-year financial forecast. The forecast will also be presented later during this workshop. The city is required to pass a balanced budget, meaning that the total proposed revenues or expenditures shall not exceed the total estimated revenues. In certain instances, we do allocate a portion of an unreserved fund balance for one-time expenditures. For capital projects that remain outstanding at the end of the year, we carry remaining funding and grant appropriations forward to the next fiscal year. And the proposed budget includes the carry forward balances for CIP projects as of June 2024. Once adopted, the budget can only be changed by City Council for the transfers between 2 or more funds. This slide provides some general information regarding governmental accounting structure. We use a fund accounting system where all resources are assigned to different purposes and tracked separately based on whether they're for general or specific purpose. There are 3 major types of funds: governmental, proprietary, and fiduciary, and each one has several subtypes. The city prepares budget for all of its funds. Under governmental funds, there is a general fund. It's like a checking account, has few restrictions. In special revenue funds, their funds are restricted or limited by regulation, statute, or codes, or funder. And we have fiduciary funds where the city is acting in the fiduciary capacity. Some highlights of the proposed 2025 fiscal year budget: 68% of general fund for the upcoming year is personnel cost. The total pension cost has increased from $10 million in the current fiscal year 2024 to $10.6 million in fiscal year 2025. This total is comprised of the normal cost and unfunded accrued liability, or UAL, which is paid separately and is not based on the payroll cost. The normal cost rates for safety only marginally increased. Rates for miscellaneous group have decreased 1.4%, and safety PEPRA rates have increased by 1.63%. And based on the actuarial reports that were just released in early August, the UAL prepayment in July of 2025 will require an additional $268,000 that we will need to appropriate at mid-year. And this is because of the investment return below the projected by CalPERS last fiscal year in 2023, which was 5.8%. And as was stated in the staff report, this fiscal year, CalPERS had a good year and reported a preliminary net return of 9.3%, which will decrease the city's unfunded accrued liability payment in the subsequent fiscal year to be paid in July 2026. This decrease has already been built into the 5-year projections that we will talk a few slides later. The proposed 2025 budget is built to include strategic investments for improving city services and addressing deferred maintenance needs. It includes funding for implementation of the second year of classification and compensation study, providing the city with competitive edge and helping to retain a qualified workforce. The budget includes $2 million in funding for the top projects from the participatory budgeting survey. These projects include $500,000 additional towards the annual pavement rehabilitation for 2025 season, $250,000 for Reagan Beach renovations, $200,000 towards Johnson Boulevard Complete Streets project, and $50,000 for US 50 road safety phase 1 upgrades. And lastly, $1 million is proposed to be set aside towards 3900 Lake Tahoe Boulevard affordable housing project. These matching funds will leverage federal and state funding opportunities to fully fund the $62 million project. The budget continues to maintain 25% of general fund operating expense reserve or committed reserve, which for 2025 fiscal year equals $14,769,729. The operating budget is balanced this year without usage of any excess reserves. Some of these excess reserves, as just stated, are appropriated towards participatory budgeting top projects. And after these appropriations and set aside, general fund is anticipated to open next fiscal year with approximately $4 million in remaining excess reserves, and we will go over the more details on one of the later slides. This slide helps to tell the budget story, and it explains the city's budget in a graphical format so that our residents easily understand where their tax dollars are being spent. One of the largest revenue categories citywide are grants, followed by transit occupancy tax, sales tax, and property tax. The grants category crosses multiple fiscal years and include current outstanding grant amounts that will be reimbursed over 1, 2, or more years. The largest expense category is building and equipment capital improvement projects, which represents the construction of the Recreation and Aquatic Center that began last fiscal year and is being funded largely by the bonds the city issued last fiscal year. The next category on the expenditure side is non-departmental and debt service. The debt service portion constitutes approximately $13 million out of $18.8 million, and the next large portion is 3 million, which is passed through TID tax charged by hotels. This all is included in the non-departmental and debt service category. A large portion of the police category of 15.7 million are grant-funded programs and capital purchases such as machinery and equipment. Cannabis revenue program is also included under police department, and it funds approximately 720,000 to capital projects. The next two categories are erosion and street and bike trail improvements projects, followed by fire, public works, and general government and unfunded liability expenditures at $8 million. On this slide, this table summarizes 2 years of historical data. Actuals for fiscal year 2023 and total budget for 2024. It also includes recommended revenues and appropriations for 2025, and it's separated by fund type citywide. On the far hand right side, you can see the increase or use of the fund balance for each type of fund. The city's primary general fund is using $500,000 from excess reserves for capital projects. The Measure S sales tax fund, which is included on the first general fund line item, is using $192,000 over its projected revenues, and that comes also from available reserves for capital projects. In special revenue fund, the usage of $12.2 million is attributed to the Measure P TOT that is waiting to be transferred out to the recreation center project once the bond proceeds are used up. An increase to enterprise funds of $687,000 is attributed to surpluses in all of the city's enterprise funds, with the largest surplus in the parking garage. This surplus will be utilized to supplement the either proposed energy projects that we will talk about a little later, and also can be used for other purposes after all improvements at the parking garage are completed. The $54 million use of fund balance in the debt service fund represents the transfer of the bond proceeds for the rec center. We transfer these bond proceeds as construction contract is being paid and funds are expended on this needed basis. Capital improvement program pretty much always has a use of fund balance due to projects crossing multiple years. And the majority of these expenditures include recreation center that hasn't been completed yet. The following 2 slides show information presented on the previous slide, but in a pie chart format. This shows revenues and other financing sources across all funds. Capital improvement program represents the largest portion this year. For the most part, it consists of the carry-forward amounts for revenue allocations that have been approved but not yet expended. The $54 million I mentioned previously that are pending to be drawn from the bond proceeds. The general fund, including Measure S, is the second largest revenue-generating fund with 32% citywide. For special revenue funds, some of the largest funds included in this type are snow removal, streets, Measure P, recreation, cannabis program, and improvement districts. This fund type also includes tourism and business improvement districts. The largest improvement district is the South Tahoe Tourism Improvement District, or TID, with the annual revenue totaling approximately $3 million. The snow removal and street maintenance funds are funded at approximately 50% by the state, with the remaining portion coming from the general fund and Measure S sales tax fund. For the snow removal fund, the cost is on a reimbursement basis. State reimburses the city 50% of the snow removal cost incurred in the prior fiscal year, including snow removal equipment purchases. Internal service fund includes health insurance and workers' comp. Trust and agency fund includes a redevelopment obligation retirement fund for successor agency and Park Avenue Community Facilities District. Expenses allocation closely matches the revenue distribution as was seen on the previous slide. We will now focus on the city's primary general fund. General fund is the primary operating fund for any governmental unit. It's used to account for inflows and outflows not associated with special purpose funds. Any revenues such as general taxes that have no restrictions are included in the general fund. General fund revenues pay for core administrative and operations services. All police, fire, and large portion of streets and snow removal operations are paid for by the general fund. The city's core general revenues this year again are property tax, transit occupancy tax, and sales tax, including Measure Q. Excluding the project area TOT, these three revenue sources account for 55% of the total general fund revenues for 2025. The project area TOT comprises an additional 13%. The category other revenue for approximately $9.4 million, it includes $3.4 million in public safety revenue, including $700,000 in 911 fees. It also includes $900,000 in parking and code citation fines and $852,000 in SNPLMA grant for the fire department. It also includes $1.7 million in building and planning fees, $1.4 million in interest revenue, $1.1 million in parks and recreation fees, and the remaining portion of approximately $1.8 million is attributed to engineering fees, real property transfer tax, Melrose tax, reimbursements, and internal service charges for motor pool division. This graph shows 3 years of general fund revenues by type. We can see that the property tax has been growing slightly in the last 3 years, while TOT and sales tax continue experiencing slower change in the last 3 years. Total primary general fund appropriations are recommended at $60.7 million, which is approximately $5.2 million less than the current fiscal year 2024 total general fund budget. The primary reason for this decrease is one-time contributions to various capital projects and various large one-time purchases using the previous fiscal year 2022-2023, excess reserves. Other two significant variances in the general government are in the general government and non-departmental. Total general government expenditures increase is primarily due to the general liability premium increase of $650,000 and the shift of GIS division from the Public Works Department to the City Manager's Office. A decrease of $1.9 million in non-departmental category is due to additional expenditures in the current 2024 fiscal year and included additional contributions to SSTMA for $500,000, land purchase for $1 million, and various other contractual obligations. Included in the public safety Increases in public safety categories, police and fire, are due to UAL and MOU changes and other various personnel costs. And expenditure increases across all departments are attributed to changes from the second year of bargaining units MOUs and rising costs across all categories. Other variances can also be attributed to the full year of new positions, such as increase in the Parks and Recreation Department of approximately $241 million, and one-time and decreases can be attributed to one-time contracts in the current fiscal year 2024, and this is relevant to finance, non-departmental, and development services.
While we're on this slide, I just have a question, just
Yes.
because before we move, it looks like the 5.8 million, or 5 million, we'll call it, is from the transfers out from what we changed from last year to this year. What is that exactly?
This was appropriated for the most part during the fiscal year for contributions toward capital projects. We appropriated $3 million, I believe, from the general fund. We also purchased the land for $1 million, and we had various other appropriations during the fiscal year. A majority of it was for transfers out to capital projects.
Okay, great. And then my only other question, looking at the general government, we've kind of gone up a little over $1 million, 23 to 24. Now we're also up another million, a little over $1 million for 24-25. Can you speak just to why that's continuing to rise at that level?
So, as I just mentioned, $650,000 of that is attributed to general liability increase and property insurance increase. So that's the whole, it's more than half of that amount. We're also transferring GIS division from the Public Works Department to City Manager's office. The total for that is approximately $250,000.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, you said you're transferring the GIS department from Public Works to City Manager, which is under general government.
Under general government.
So, but Public Works is also still going up.
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, all expenditures across all departments are going up due to implementation of classification and compensation study, which is it's a second year, so it's a cumulative increase from the previous year. We under Public Works, we have also included a significant funding for maintenance, deferred maintenance needs across all facilities.
Okay.
If I may, also, the Public Works Fund, there's street maintenance money has been increased. We've, over the last few years, we've bought an equipment for Public Works to do in-house street work, and this budget supports them with money to actually take care of some of that crack sealing and pothole filling and maybe some slurry seal one of these years.
And this is a graphical representation of expenditures by department. It shows that the largest portion of expenditures is for the city's core services, police, fire, and public works. Also, transfers out include transfers to snow removal and streets, which is the city's core services. Looking at the general fund expenditures by department and category, we see that the largest portion of the city's general fund expense is personnel, as mentioned earlier, at 68%. This is a 2% increase from the last fiscal year. Contractual services represent 8%, and other operating cost is at 12%. This once again demonstrates that the primary product of municipal government is to provide functional services to the community: police, fire, parks and recreation, capital improvements, public works, and development services, and the services that support those functions: human resources, legal, finance, communications. And we will go into more detail on what some of these expenditure categories are comprised of on the next slide. Personnel cost, before special items such as UL cost, temporary seasonal employees cost, any other lump sum increases that had to be added after the budget has already been prepared by a line item, such as health insurance cost increase of $170,000. Permanent employee salaries and benefits are 50% of the total general fund budget. When evaluating general fund salaries and benefits by department, we can see again that police, fire, and public works core services continue to comprise the majority of these expenditures at 74% of the total personnel cost. Total FTEs, or full-time equivalent, allocated to the general fund is 177.55 FTEs, which is a 1.3 FTE decrease from last year. The total additional 39.6 FTEs, full-time equivalent, are allocated to other programs and funds, such as streets, snow removal, VHR, housing, parking garage, and airport. Some of these programs are also funded by the general fund by transfers out. In comparison to the previous fiscal year adopted budget, the total number of FTEs in 2025 is up by 3 positions, and it equals total of 217 positions. The change is due to the addition of recreation coordinator and maintenance manager positions in preparation for the recreation center opening, and the addition of the fire division chief position, which is funded by grant. The remaining small difference is due to a partial year funding for one position due to retirement and short overlap. This slide represents a 3-year history of actual and budgeted transfers out to other funds for the last 2 years, plus the proposed 2025 fiscal year budget. That's where we can see how transfers out have changed from the current fiscal year to the proposed budget, and this is the decrease of over $5 million. We can see that in the current fiscal year, the city is contributing to CIP fund $4.3 million, and we're also funding several other programs, such as VHR fund required some transfer but will not be needed in the current fiscal year, and also transit center and public works vehicle replacement, which the city's general fund has contributed $180,000 in the current fiscal year. In the 2025 proposed budget, the primary recipient of the transfer, again, is the city's debt service fund, and the funds will be used to pay the city's outstanding 2016 bonds, which were used in the construction of the Heavenly Village, 2014 pension obligation bonds, 2012 certificate of participation, and 2014 Harrison Avenue lease bonds. And the last two both were for road improvements. Other transfers include transfers to streets, snow removal, stormwater, long-term capital replacement, housing, and housing fund to support operations in those programs. The city's general fund adopted budget includes also $500,000 transfer to CIP for top projects from participatory budgeting survey using the previous year's excess reserves. We will now briefly look at the Measure S sales tax general fund. It's projected to generate $7.8 million in revenue in fiscal year 2025. For expenditures, we're proposing to allocate $8 million, with a difference of approximately $190,000, and it comes from the accumulated fund balance from the prior year. The primary allocation of the $8 million from Measure S Sales Tax Fund includes $3 million to road rehabilitation, and which is a $500,000 increase from the participatory budgeting survey results. Fire Station 3 rehabilitation set aside, we continue setting aside $500,000, and that is included in the $3.5 million. We're transferring for communication system and snow removal equipment debt service. We're funding 7 firefighters previously funded by SAFER grant, that's for approximately $1.2 million. Fire marshal position is funded at 50%. Police lieutenant position is funded at 100%. Stormwater program is transferred approximately $99,000. For expanded snow removal operations for 24-hour snow removal, we're using $500,000 from the Measure S sales tax fund, and for in-house street patching, we're using $630,000 from this fund. There is also $350,000 transferred for the purchase of equipment for the public works, streets, and snow operations. I have to mention that funding for positions that I just listed, 7 firefighters, police lieutenant, fire marshal, is occurred not based on budgeted but on actual, which is in real life sometimes come below what we budgeted. So as a result, we sometimes accumulate additional funding in that fund that we use in the subsequent years. In Measure S sales tax fund, the available fund balance at the beginning of the year was $2.3 million. And in the current year's budget, this slide can show that we're using approximately $1.6 million of that amount, and we're using additional $192,000 in the proposed budget. So after we close the books, we project that there will be approximately $580,000 remaining for additional allocations next fiscal year. And now we will move on to the departmental budget presentations. Each department will have a chance to present the most significant items in their budget. And we will start with the city clerk. Actually, we'll start with city council.
City council, yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you, city council. So the major budget expenditures for the city council budget are for our Granicus agenda management system. We use this management system for all of our city council meetings and all 5 of our city commissions. It is the archive of all of our videos for all of our commission meetings and city council. And our next largest expense is for our Spanish interpreter, which is about $30,000. That interprets all of our city council meetings, all of our planning commission meetings, as well as our agenda material. And that's all I have for city council. And then for city clerk, our major budget expenditures are for are on public transparency. For our online document portal, this is our ECS imaging. This is it captures all of our permanent records for the city council and for all of our commissions, contracts, resolutions, ordinances. It also has a public portal. We recently just transitioned to a cloud platform for security and a seamless public experience. It's quicker for the public to access those documents now. And our next biggest expenditure are for Tribune ads, our ads in our only adjudicated newspaper. And this would be ads that we would place for ordinances, elections, and public hearings for fees and zoning use. And that is all of our major expenses for the city clerk's department.
Ms. Blankenship, would you please advance the slides? Oh, you did, thank you. Good morning, Heather Stroud, City Attorney. The City Attorney's Office is more of an inward-facing department supporting all of the city departments and strategic plan goals, as well as providing legal advice to the city council and all the boards and commissions and departments. We also handle either directly all litigation involving the city or oversee outside counsel in doing so. And within our risk management function in the city attorney's office, oversee workers' compensation. Our risk manager is also our ADA coordinator, oversee worker safety programs, liability claims, and insurance procurement. In this year's budget, as was mentioned earlier, there is a big increase in our insurance costs that we procure through our risk pool, CIRA, including a 30% increase in liability insurance and 38% increase in property insurance. We always are trying to minimize our costs by doing as much with our in-house small but mighty city attorney's office as possible to minimize outside counsel costs. And again, we do support all of the strategic plan goals. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, Mayor and council members. First of all, Olga, great job on the introductory and getting us all organized to have this budget hearing today. I appreciate it. As you know, the city manager oversees all departments. We have our communications, government relations, functions out of the city manager's office. Human resources division helps to manage employee relationship matters, as well as our labor negotiation process and citywide recruitment efforts. They've been doing a great job keeping us fully staffed. I appreciate that effort. Sustainability facilities and energy efficiency upgrade projects is built into the city manager's office. And we are making a change for our GIS position, where it's data and innovation manager, moving into the city manager's office to help us track our KPIs and our strategic plan initiatives to show actual progress. And we've built the strategic plan tracker that is now a public facing website, so the community can see if we're achieving what we set out to do. And we can have those open conversations with council as to why we're not meeting certain initiatives and what changes we need to make in staffing or budget allocations as we progress through the year. Public messaging, pretty proud of our public information office. As our national community survey showed, our outreach efforts are highly effective, and the community felt that to be good. We have a lot of options for our community to get involved with education and outreach programs, whether that's coffee with the mayor or our State of the City event that's coming up. We always try to get out there and offer a wide range of opportunities for our public to engage in what the city is doing and ways that people, offer ways that people can engage in decision-making processes. One thing I really focus on is our staff recognition and retention programs. It's not recruitment first, it's retention first. We have really good people and we want to keep them. And so, we manage our employee engagement efforts, our annual award ceremony efforts, and that's something I put a high priority on in the city manager's office. And then the city strategic planning efforts, the city council will be embarking on this in the first quarter of 25 to update our current 5-year strategic plan. So stay tuned on that, as well as our climate action plan. One thing I'd like to point out is the budget here does talk about a significant climate action plan initiative that requires funding at a future meeting that council will have to grapple with and discuss. Do we want to fund this or not? And that has to do with an energy services contract that'll be forthcoming to council to consider. It involves making facility upgrades that have the potential to reduce energy cost, that savings could then be used to pay any debt service we might incur to fund that project. So that's something really excited about that project. It's been a long time coming, but that's not on the agenda today, but just want you to share a little foreshadowing there. So I'll turn it over to finance.
In finance, we're responsible for timely and accurately capturing and reporting all financial activities and ensuring compliance with all state and federal regulations related to financial matters and city's financial policies. Finance functional areas include day-to-day accounting, such as accounts payable, receivable, fixed assets, payroll, as well as the budget. Financial policies, reporting, revenue collection, cash management, debt management, grant management, purchasing, and of course, information systems. Our projects and objectives for 2025 budget year include active targeted pursuit of grants. We have applied for 22 grants in fiscal year 2024, totaling $7.7 million, and received 19 awards for approximately $6.8 million citywide. We will be focusing on continuing strengthening the city's cybersecurity, developing the formal security awareness program. We will be completing another ERP software upgrade, the city's primary financial software upgrade. We will also do the user fee studies and among other projects. And always, as always, our primary objectives remains to continue improve our information technologies, provide transparency to the public through timely and accurate reporting, and maintain accurate accounting and clean audit opinion.
Good morning, Mayor Council. Chief Dave Stevenson. Your police department, the South Lake Tahoe Police Department, is a full-service law enforcement agency. Our area of responsibility or jurisdiction is the city of South Lake Tahoe. Quick overview of the department. We have just over 60 full-time and part-time total employees. Of that, we have allocated 42 sworn positions. So we have allocation for 42 sworn officers or police officers from the chief down. I am happy that we have filled 41 of those 42 positions as of today, which is the best we've been in a long time that I can remember. And we have someone in background for that 42nd position. The police department is divided into 3 divisions: operations, support, and administration. Operations is basically most of what we do, the patrol division with all the ancillary duties assigned to it. And then our support division, which is basically everything but patrol, and including the joint dispatch center. And some of those things are listed on, some of the subgroups of those divisions are listed on the board. Budget highlights for 24-25, in addition to vehicle purchases, which are one-time purchases that tend to come up every single year. The big one for 24-25, if you remember, is that our body-worn camera system was on a 5-year contract. That will be renewed during this next fiscal year. And with that, I will pass it on to whoever's next.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Are there options for that you think are good for body-worn cameras that have longer durations rather than 5 years, or is that sort of the most cost-effective of body-worn cameras that you're comfortable with that are of quality? I mean,
it seems like the 5-year contract seems to be pretty standard.
Okay.
But even with approval here today, we can dive a lot more into that later when it actually comes up for approval of purchase at a future city council meeting, should it be approved in the budget.
Okay.
I'll just jump in also. I mean, the body-worn cameras are tied to our car cameras as well, and the whole integration between body, car. Axon is a leader in the industry, and the 5-year contract allows us warranty, so we can update those pieces as needed throughout the contract term as well.
I guess the question would be, do they offer an extended, longer-term warranty? Is that an option rather than just the 5 years, or is that sort of what it is?
I can ask. 10 years seems to be a big one.
We can look into that, but this item will be coming back, as the chief said. Good question. Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Jim Drennan, Fire Chief for the City Fire Department. I think I'm getting feedback off her mic. Just a quick overview for the fire department. We are an all-risk agency. We primarily deal with the operations division, which is your 911 calls and your kind of the bread and butter with the fire department. Additionally, we have the prevention division, which is all things fire marshal, fire inspector, that's commercial fire inspections, as well as public education, and in this case, ordinances as well that pop up for the city. Most recently, we've added the fuels division, which is nearly essentially 100% grant funded. The driving direction for the division chief who's in charge of that, Jay Manning, is to seek and manage other grants that are available. And we'll kind of get into that here a little bit with the budget. as far as the operations side of the house, everything is listed off there, whether it's suppression, EMS, rescue, training, special operations. But again, we are an all-risk agency. Highlights for 24-25 on the budget side, or on the operations side of the budget, is in collaboration with the police department and dispatch, is to complete the radio system upgrades, which we're right up against that finish line. Station 1 repairs and renovation, which were approved in a previous council meeting here just recently. We also are very excited about the plans that are in place for a new fire station, and we'll be working with the city on that going forward. The land has been purchased, or at least it's been agreed to be purchased. One of the highest priorities for us at the fire department right now are not just physical health, but also behavioral health. So there's a high priority in that within our training budget. That's everything. That's, we train an awful lot on the hard skills out in the field, what you see in the street, but this is more of the soft skills and how to maintain longevity in this career. And then the last large expenditure that we may be saddled with this year is SCBA. We're currently in the process of waiting to hear back on a grant from AFG, Assistance to Fire Grant. So hopefully that will take care of that. But if not, I have a plan B in place that does not include requesting monies from the general fund. We have funds within our budget, so more to come on that. On the prevention side, we just finished the Defensible Space Ordinance, and there'll be some, they'll be addressing that within the budget as well. She's also managing all of our pub ed, Firewise communities, et cetera. Lastly, I would just mention that within the fuels division, that is a collaborative effort with every agency on the South Shore. Probably the nicest part of that is all of the funding for future projects, not just the division, is from outside sources. So that's mostly CAL FIRE, Forest Service, CTC, and the RCD, and they're essentially 100% funding those projects. Any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to, sorry, I just wanted to verify something. Is it, I just want to verify that the current department policy on charging fees for ambulance co-response, that it is now current policy, because I got a question about this, is it now current policy that those fees are only charged when insurance covers them and they are not charged when insurance does not? This was an item from a few months ago. I just want to
the bills go out. We don't necessarily always know whether or not their insurance is going to pay or not, and so the individual may receive it. Our policy is 100%. If it's going to be you writing a check and you call in, we'll waive the fee. So there's no, we've never taken anybody to collections. We've never chased anybody. The bills come, and it's oftentimes incumbent on you to pass it on to your insurance agency if they haven't received it. But we are not forcing anybody to pay anything.
So, I'm sorry, so just to clarify then, so they'll still get a bill from the fire department then?
The bills will go out, and
Okay.
it's like if somebody were to send you
Yeah.
any other medical bill, you would receive it from Barton. You would then pass it on to your insurance if necessary, because the billing mechanisms out to insurance companies is often not smooth.
Right. So a citizen might receive a bill. If they receive a bill, they would pass it off to their insurance companies. Is there an indication that comes with that bill that says that if your insurance doesn't cover it, then don't worry about it? Like, how does that mechanism work to make them available? Because if they are on the Medi-Cal plan, I believe that is the main plan that doesn't cover it, or if they don't have health insurance, which is distressingly common for people in our workforce here, how are they made aware that that bill is waived if they either don't have insurance or if their insurance plan doesn't cover it?
So this comes down to, there's something in the bill that explains and expresses an issue with hardship. So if it's a bill that you are willing and able to pay, then that's fine. It's whether or not there's a hardship associated with it. So if you have fixed income or you have any other issues with that, our intention is not to bilk people that are in.
I understand the intention. I was just drilling into the idea of how the person on the receiving end is made aware of those intentions, so that they know that if they have a hardship, that it's not going to go and be something on their credit report, and it's not going to be something that they're going to be chased. How do they know that? Because I know that as
Right.
we're
So
having
we-
this
so we-
conversation, but.
So we use a third-party billing agency that manages that. On the bill itself, it will basically state for any questions or concerns, any issues with your bill, please contact this phone number. So I'd have to speak with them about adding language that says something along the lines of, this is not going to be chased into your, we're not going after a collections agency or something along those lines. Does that?
Yeah, okay. I might want to follow up on that offline then.
Just a comment, if we put something on there that says that we won't go after them, insurance may or may not pay. So we need to be very, very careful, I would imagine, with that.
Great. Thank you, Chief Journal.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the City Council. For the record, my name is Anush Najjar, Director of Public Works. To begin with, I would like to go over the different functions we have in Public Works. We have 5 different divisions, about 10 different functions. Those include the Public Works Administration, Engineering and Facilities Division. We do all of the CIP program development, oversee the projects in construction. We also do the street maintenance, which includes the snow operation and stormwater compliance. We also manage the fleet division and airport division. As our finance director mentioned, we have 41 FTEs, and I think we do a lot with the resources that we have. Next slide. So to go over some of the highlights, in terms of staffing, we're recommending to replace our resident engineer or the inspector with an associate civil engineer. We believe that we can accomplish more with a licensed engineer. Will be able to help us with our active transportation projects, traffic engineering and the requests that we have, and also do the inspection. So we will get more from this individual than an inspector. So that will be an addition to our team. We also are recommending changing of classification from an engineering tech to engineering tech 2. We have given more assignments and responsibilities to the engineering tech, and I think this change in the classification recognizes that contribution. In terms of contract services, we work very closely with our airport division to be able to contract out all of the facilities, airports, and also the sidewalk, which was authorized by City Council last year. So the total contract is about $435,000 plus the airport portion that will be paid out of the enterprise funds. We have made significant investment during the last 2 years in snow equipment operation. The council has approved over $10 million in equipment. The first year I was here 3 years ago, we were able to hire 1 seasonal CDL employee. This year, we have 14 applicants with CDL. We've already made offers to 9. We will be fully staffed for this snow event, for this snow season. So that's a major accomplishment. The staff have new equipment, and we're going to continue to do what we're doing with the snow operation. We are also recommending 2 dump trucks and a Chevy truck for $396,000. We're doing a lot of in-house paving work. And we have in our budget about $600,000 for materials and equipment, rental equipment, to do more in-house pavement work, maintenance work. We are in the process of developing a pavement maintenance plan in addition with our rehab program, because we need to continue to maintain the new pavement that we're putting in and make sure that we have a long-term useful life for the pavement. So this year we have, for example, paved Ski Run, Vandalie, and we're going to be doing Ash, and we'll continue to do pothole repairs throughout the city. So again, more emphasis in terms of in-house pavement work and repair work. We're going to try to do more with the in-house work that we're doing and be able to make sure that we provide a good service. Next slide. In terms of capital improvement program, the council heard from me last meeting. The proposed budget includes 11 projects for 24-25. 5 of those projects are from the participatory budget recommendation for 24-25. 8 projects, which some of them have already come to the City Council for additional budget appropriation, but we're going to complete that probably by November. Right now, we have 20 active and ongoing projects, and the total recommendation for this year budget is about $13.6 million. And our CIP program is a very balanced program. We have active transportation projects like Bijou Connector Project, Dennis Machada, and we also have our roadway rehab project, which is very important to the public. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Zach Thomas, for the record, Director of Development Services. I'll give a brief overview of the services that this department provides for the community. Development Services is a full-service department in relation to all development in the city and provides assistance throughout the entire process of development, divided into 3 divisions from the Planning Division, Building Division, and Housing Division. Planning Division focuses on planning entitlements, land use, long-term planning, area plans, things of that nature. Also provides significant interface with outside agencies, coordination with TRPA, and aligning our policies, our development standards with TRPA, things like that, ensuring that development can occur. Building Division provides, again, services throughout the entire development process, from front counter service, assisting with how buildings can be designed, how they can be built, all the way to plan review, plan check, and then ultimately health, life, safety inspections related to building inspections. Housing Division is a full-service housing program implementing division, all the way from assisting in the development of new housing, the inspection of existing housing to ensure quality housing, quality within existing housing stock, as well as the implementation of additional housing programs related to servicing the community and providing a response hotline for housing complaints. Highlighted in the budget, again, these are just some of the components I mentioned. Significant amount of revenue is generated from the services provided, brought in through planning permit fees, building permit fees. A significant amount of the work provided, conducted within the Housing Division is provided through grant funding. So a lot of staff time goes into acquiring grant funding, and that's related to implementing programs as well as new construction. A notable component going on in the department is the implementation of brand new permit tracking software, and that has been occurring throughout this year and will be going live this fall. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. I'm John Stark, Director of Parks and Recreation. The Parks and Recreation Department budget supports the maintenance, operation, and programming of community spaces, as well as our department produces special events for the city. Recreation staff, to give you an update with aquatics programming, have recruited and certified lifeguards necessary to return swim lesson programs to levels beyond what was previously offered. We currently have 15 lifeguards staffed at the pool. This summer, we offered 340 swim lessons compared to 150 in 2023 and 220 in 2022. We plan to continue to offer swim lessons now year-round, with the next season beginning in September. Staff will continue to offer lifeguard certification courses throughout the year. This year, there was a big focus on creating new programming. We conducted a new recreation program survey and had over 800 responses from the community. This information is being used to implement new programs now, as well as to inform our business plan for the new rec center. We published our first recreation program guide since 2014 and look forward to continue publishing the guide twice annually as part of our marketing strategy. New programs being offered include mini mountain movers for early childhood play, yoga classes including accessible yoga, everybody yoga, kiddo yoga, and baby and me yoga, first tee youth golf lessons at Bijou Golf Course, a youth basketball league, story time with a mermaid, and line dancing lessons. Upcoming programs include the Silver Striders Senior Walking Club that begins this Thursday, NFL Flag Football League and Sierra Spirit Cheer Program beginning September 8th, singing lessons beginning September 9th, middle school improv classes September 11th, Aikido lessons, Tai Chi class, and Lake Tahoe Soccer League for youth and adults this fall. We're working hard also to develop a pickleball league for the winter. We continue to look forward to ramping up programming and creating new partnerships as we look towards opening the new rec center in 2026. Staff are working closely with the Parks Foundation also to seek donations for fixtures, equipment, and scholarships for the new rec center, and encourage everyone to visit SouthTahoeParksFoundation.org to join our fundraising campaign. As I mentioned, the department offers special events, many that you know, like Winter Festival of Lights, 4th of July Parade, Parks Make Life Better Month, Movies in the Park, and the upcoming Multicultural Festival that's on September 14th. We also host partner events like Live at Lakeview, and new events this year, Boo Bash Halloween Celebration and the Turkey Trot. Our parks team operates our parks, trails, boat ramp, golf course, and beaches, including 180 acres of parkland and 14 miles of trail. The parks team this past year has assumed forestry projects from the Public Works Department and will continue to care for trees and perform removals throughout the city. And lastly, we're excited to announce the opening of Ski Run Park and celebrate with the many volunteers that helped to create this space for the community. There's going to be a ribbon cutting here on Friday, September 6th at 4:30. The park's open and available to enjoy for the public. Thanks for your support. I'm available for any questions.
Mayor, if I may, Olga teed me up there to end on the happy note. Parks and Recreation, everybody loves Parks and Recreation, but it's pretty exciting to see the programming that's gotten going the last couple of years. So kudos to John Stark and his team. I appreciate that. You know, the rec center is a really big project. The city's never had a capital project of that size. And, you know, thank you, council. You're giving the resources we need to make sure we open the door and it's a good facility that our community will love to engage with, come exercise, meet their friends. So I'm just happy about all of our departments. Clearly, there's a lot of work going on from police, fire, public works, development services, parks and rec. One thing I want to highlight is that the finance director and I have talked, and we put it in the staff report just to be transparent, but we are not in the position, and I'm going to kind of keep a tight belt on any new staff additions in the next year and a half. I think when you look at our 5-year projections, we need to be cautious about adding new positions. So you know, I came here in April of 2020, and we had 196 employees, and 4.5 years later, we now have 217. So that's a large amount of employees added, but it shows in the work and what the staff just told you we are doing. We did not have a housing program, really, when I got here. Now we have a housing program. We did not have an engineering department that's designed the way Mr. Najad's designed it so we can actually deliver the best CIP we can afford, and we're doing that. Parks and Recreation was bare bones, and we've added staff there. The legal requirements that the state of California has put on us for reporting in our police department is now supported by upper management staff that needs to be in place to support that and make sure we're complying with state laws and providing the service to our police advisory commission to be transparent on how we're being transparent and accountable in policing. We did not have a fire defensible space program. So, I mean, I can go up and down all of our departments, and what we've built in the last 4.5 years and what this budget supports is about our capacity, in my humble opinion. but I'm going to turn it back over to Olga to talk about how we're shaping up and how our budget still looks good and we still have discretionary money for council to make decisions on matters that come up and as needed. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now discuss the projections of the undesignated fund balance and projections for the next 5 fiscal years. We started this fiscal year with approximately $11.8 million in discretionary funding. During the year, City Council allocated a net of approximately $5.5 million to various purposes. This includes $500,000 additional contributions to South Shore Transit Management Association, $1 million for the land purchase from the successor agency. During the year, we appropriated approximately $3.5 million in net from undesignated excess reserves. If you recall, we increased some revenues. We also allocated approximately $5.5 million to various capital purchases and equipment. Several of those were in public works, parks and recreation, and we also allocated a large portion to the CIP. Additionally, $430,000 was carried over from the prior year. $740,000 was appropriated for various other contractual obligations during the year, and we disencumbered $644,000 from the grant match set aside. So we ended the year, or we're ending the year, or as of today, was approximately $6.2 million. So how did we come that high, where only at mid-year we reported approximately maybe $3 million? Well, $644,000 was unencumbered from the grant match, and we had approximately $1 million set aside, and now we had approximately $350,000 set aside. This is for the grants that we applied for, but they were not awarded. We also were planning to spend approximately $1.6 million for the recreation center when as the year progressed, we appropriated a contract, and instead of pre-planned appropriations from the general fund, it was appropriated from the Measure P, TOT fund, and that reduced our obligations towards the rec center by approximately $1.4 million. We also anticipated that our increase to the committed 25% reserve would be higher, approximately $1.4 million, but as we looked at our total expenditures for the next year, we subtracted some one-time cost that we normally do not include in the calculations of the 25% reserve. So our increase to that committed reserve was also approximately $1 million. For the rest of this fiscal year, we're projecting approximately $1 million in budget savings. This is a conservative estimate, and we will know better in approximately 3-4 months after the year close. This makes our projected ending fund balance at $5.5 million, and that includes the previous year's excess of approximately $4 million. In the proposed budget, we are, from the general fund, from the $5.5 million, we're allocating $1.5 million towards participatory budget and survey projects. $500,000 of it is actually being appropriated, and that created that net expenditure of $500,000. $1 million is being set aside by the resolution towards the housing project. So this will be reserved very similar to the grant match set aside. And it will be reserved until we know of any federal and state funding that we might supplement with this $1 million. And this leaves approximately $4 million at the end of the year, at the end of the current fiscal year. As City Manager Irvin mentioned, we are proposing to use a portion of this $4 million towards the energy savings project. and I'll talk about it a little bit in a few minutes. There are also other expenditures that we anticipate. There will be $500,000 brought back to City Council on September 10th for additional appropriations toward SSTMA. We will also be needing approximately $260,000 reserved for mid-year appropriations for unfunded, CalPERS unfunded accrued liability. We propose to reserve this funding for the energy savings project, and this project cost is approximately $10 to $12 million. More will come on September 24th, approximately, about this project. However, if the city makes additional contributions, cash contributions to the project, this will lower our interest cost. It will create energy savings costs that we can achieve over a 30-year period of time. And it will supplement significantly that project cost overall. I must also mention that the $2 million that City Council set aside in the last fiscal year is not included in this $4 million. This has been set aside, and it's listed on the slide at the top. We're proposing to retain this $2 million as set aside because we are still anticipating increases in pension costs. Not next year, next fiscal, in the subsequent fiscal year, we will have some decrease, maybe approximately $1 million of the increased amount. It's complicated. We have 9 tiers, and each tier goes up at a different scale, but we still anticipate some increases in 2026, 2027 towards the pension cost. We are also implementing third year of class and comp next year. We anticipate a reduction in interest earnings because we anticipate that feds will drop the interest rates in a month, couple of months, and will continue dropping it. And our investments will continue earning some good investment return maybe in the next year. However, they're still scheduled to mature, and our interest income in the current fiscal year was $1.4 million. We do not anticipate this to continue. So as we will go in the next several slides, this decrease in revenue will affect our projections and bottom line in the general fund. We also anticipate slower than desired revenue growth. It's still, many economists debate whether we're in recession or not in recession. And no one can predict what really major revenues can do over the next, whether they're going to go up, down. Consultants predict sales tax will stay flat. We can expect property tax maybe continue to grow at a slightly higher rate than our other 2 major revenues. But TOT has been stagnant over this year, and we even anticipate slight decrease over the projected amount. But we will go over the 5-year plan in just a couple of slides. As I previously mentioned, staff continue to actively pursue grants opportunities to supplement any funding that we might have somewhere else from general fund or Measure S sales tax. We now have approximately 51 approved grants, and this is an increase from 40 grants just last year. And we're managing $46 million in grants. The largest grants are $9.3 million for Tahoe Valley Greenbelt, $4.1 million for Pioneer Trail pedestrian upgrades, $2.2 million for Bijou Park Creek Restoration Project, and we have several others. As I mentioned previously, we have a grant match set-aside balance of approximately $359,000. We started this process in October of 2021 when staff brings staff reports for council approval to apply for a grant. And if we anticipate there will be grant match requirement, we set aside this from our available access reserves. So the $4 million that we have available also can be used toward any grant matching requirements. The 3 grants that are pending approval are $269,000 for Cycle 4 Pioneer Trail, $54,000 for Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant, and $35,000 in matching funds will be needed for EV charging stations. City code requires that established the general fund committed reserve policy. And the purpose of this committed reserve is when the city faces economic recession or depression, when the city is impacted by natural disaster, if the city is experiencing decline in revenues, and when unpredicted large one-time expenditure arise, or when the city faces unexpected liability. For fiscal year 2025, our reserve requirement is $14.8 million, and it's projected to grow to $16.2 million in fiscal year 2030. And when we set aside this 25% committed reserve, the city code also states what this reserve can be used for. We can use the reserve to phase into fiscal distress while still focusing on maintaining the council's strategic priorities. To the extent possible, general fund committed reserve should be the last resort to balance the city's budget. Appropriations from the general fund committed reserve shall not exceed 25% of the reserve per year. So if we do face any of the needs to appropriate from the reserve, our city code states that we shall not, to the extent possible, appropriate 25%, which is approximately $4 million from the current reserve. And the general fund committed reserve shall not be used to support recurring operating expenditures. We will now look at the 5-year general plan. So this update, we present the update of the 5-year plan twice to City Council in March and August. This plan covers fiscal year 2026 through 2030. We will briefly go over the assumptions in the 5-year plan. We project that the property tax will grow 2% in the subsequent 2 fiscal years, and then 3% beyond that. TOT projections are very minimal, just 1% and 1.25% over the subsequent 4 years. The same is for sales tax. Vehicle license fees are growing at a slightly higher scale, the same with franchise fees. We're using annually approximately between 1.9 million and 2.3 million from Measure S sales tax to fund fire and police, as well as sidewalk snow removal. On the expenditure sides, we have very modest increases for salaries. Health is also projected to increase only 3%. However, we anticipated a lower increase this year, but unfortunately received not very good news that the increase was 11%. Pension cost, we project it to increase as well as the unfunded accrued liability. And on the other operating and personnel expenditures, we project between 2% and 3% increases. And back to the general fund 5-year plan for fiscal year 2026, based on today's expenditures and all the programs that the city will be doing in fiscal year 2025, we project approximately 2.3 million in deficit for 2026. And major contributors to this deficit are expenditures increase outpacing the revenue increase. So revenue increase are revenues are increasing at a much lower pace than expenditures are. In the subsequent years, we also are projecting deficits, although it starts decreasing in 2027 and 2028 after the payoff of the 2016 bonds and 2014 pension obligation bonds. However, the deficit starts growing again in 2029 and 2030.
Real quickly, if you could,
Yes.
Ms. DiCamarova, on this slide, now what we call undesignated funds in these years, they're not really being shown on this slide, is that correct? Just because we're looking at for this year, 500,000 loss, but we had a total of about 6.5 million in undesignated. So I'm just trying to understand, is that not accounted for here?
Well, in the very first column, actuals for 22-23, you can see that our revenues were 58 million, but our actual expenditures were 54. That created a surplus of $4.5 million. So from the last fiscal year, we were able, that's the surplus that we have been working on this whole year, utilizing it, and the portion of it is being carried into the next fiscal year, allowing us to appropriate 500,000 from that excess reserve. So the 4.5 million gain is what created our excess reserves for the general fund.
And so looking at 25, 26 with a 2.2 million deficit, essentially, that's assuming we spend the entire 6.5 million and then we end up with a $2.2 million? That's where I'm confused, is how we end up at what I would see as an $8.7 million difference in our budget if we're 2.2 million off.
So we should not be comparing actuals to the budget, because our actuals, usually expenditures come below the budgeted, and sometimes revenues come above the budgeted. That's what creates our excess reserves. And we have to budget fully for 100% of all positions citywide, especially in the general fund, which has the largest portion of all salaries and benefits. When we budget for 100%, we do put a small vacancy factor, which is about 600,000. However, we always exceed, in our vacancies, we always exceed this amount. So even though we budget for 100% of all 217 positions, or 177 for the general fund, in reality, we always have vacancies. Also, when we have injuries in the public safety or miscellaneous groups, we transfer those salaries actually into our workers' compensation fund. That creates additional savings. So we can see that if we look at the salaries, or even at the first line police department for 2022, police department cost was 12.8 million. And for the proposed budget, it's 15.7 million. It looks like it's a $3 million increase. However, in reality, those were the actual cost, and 15.7 is the budget cost. 12.8 included approximately 1.8 million in salary savings. So there were injuries, vacancies in the police department, which did not use the budget that we allocated. And at the end, it created 4.5 million in excess, in the gain, you can say, for the general fund.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like it might be germane to have, because we've got the 22-3 actual, to show what you're describing. It might be good on these slides to have the 22-3 budget as well to compare, because you would show the budget versus the actual. Then this year we have the budget, but we don't have the actual because the year ain't over yet.
Right.
And then in the future we have proposed. So to be able to show, so that way we were comparing budget to budget and preceding years, actuals to actuals, because it sounds like that's the right way to draw year-on-year comparisons.
We can include it next year in the presentation.
Yeah, and so the 6.1 million negative at the bottom of the 23-4 budget, some of that's going to be plugged by the preceding year's underrun.
And the year before that.
And various years before. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but one thing in order to make these look so that they look less dire, because without the exposition, it appears, it's not the case, but it appears that we're heading into some sort of, budget nightmare, but that's not really what's going on, because you've got year after year, preceding year versus year excess. Would it be appropriate accounting to show that the gain from each year, to show that as a rollover in the next year's budget as essentially a revenue by type, to say rollover from preceding year, and then in the preceding year's actual, to show that as an expenditure or as a transfer out, rather than a transfer to departments, a transfer across time, right? To say that this 4.5 is being transferred out of 22-3 into the 23-4 budget. And that way it doesn't show necessarily that we're in the red, because we're really not. We've got last year's money that is rolling over into this year's money, and the accounting is stovepiped within a year. But there really isn't some huge deficit because we've got leftover from all the preceding years. But it's just not reflected in a way that's visible, in the sense that anything's visible in a giant pile of numbers. But it's not shown. It doesn't show in a way that you can clearly see that isn't really a deficit in the strict sense, because there is money from the preceding year. It's just not shown as a revenue, right? As a
use of fund.
As a fund. It's not shown as a fund balance in the revenue by type, because it's not technically a revenue, but it's the preceding year's revenues rolled over. So have that listed as a rollover from preceding year's amount, and have that be a line, a row in this column.
Yeah,
would that be a thing that meets the accounting practices that we can show in the future?
It's a budget. We can show however way we want, and we can add a line next year that will show the usage of the previous year on the revenue at the top portion.
Yeah, I think that would be good to show that, just so that it doesn't. Because this is, in a sense, this is.
We can talk about that when we come back to discussion. If council wants to do that, then we will.
Okay.
But let's just keep it to questions real quick and let Ms. Tikamarova move forward.
Maurice, I think that the answer to the question is that, yeah, it can be done. I've seen it done both ways across the country, various jurisdictions. So it's just a matter of what council's preference is. And, our CPI certified finance director has her marching orders to follow GASB accounting practices and keeps us on track. But that's something council can discuss if you choose to.
Well, then let me ask this as a specific question then. The 4.5 from preceding years plus however many years before that, how much, because it's showing 6.121 million loss in the next year. What is the total amount being rolled over from all preceding years into the 23-4 budget?
Well, based on this presentation, it looks like 1.7 has been also available from the years before. So as we close the year, as we encumber or then unencumber some funds, we realize that additional funding becomes available, as I just showed with the grant match set aside, where we had $1 million set aside just so a lot, this, even though there is a surplus of 4.5, I believe 2 years ago, we had $2 million set aside in the grant match, but we either appropriated or we didn't get the match. So we are able to allocate more funding as we unencumber that grant match set aside, or any other set asides like recreation center funding, for example. We're able to include it in the budget as the budget allocation, if that makes sense.
If I can, the purpose of the 5-year plan is really just assumptions.
Look at the future.
Yeah, we're just trying to forecast what an assumption is, and I think your question's valid, but as I always say, a budget is a plan subject to change, and there's a lot of things that we don't know are going to happen in the next 5 years. So This is just a good practice for us to take a hard look at what the outlook could be. That's all I'll say.
For Measure S, Sales Tax General Fund 5-year plan, we are projecting that the city will continue be able to fund $2.5 million for road construction, fund fire station 2 staffing, along with other 2 safety positions. We are projecting to be able to continue to fund in-house street maintenance program, approximately $500,000 each year, as well as in-house enhanced operations for snow removal, 24-hour snow removal, and sidewalk snow removal. This plan anticipates issuance of the Fire Station 3 construction bonds in fiscal year 2026 or 2027, with the anticipated bond debt service of approximately $2.2 million. There is also some snow removal equipment purchases budgeted in every second year, and this leaves some still remaining fund balance in the Measure S sales tax fund. And just to remind again, those are projections. We don't know whether sales tax are going to go up or down. At this time, we're projecting it will go up to 3%. However, Measure S has been outperforming slightly our current year's projections. And this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. DiCamarova. It's really just awesome to be presented to how much we're doing in the city and how much you've really got our finances together. So with that, we will go ahead and move to clarifying questions. Ms. Wallace.
Ms. DiCamarova, I have a question. Similar to how we set aside the grant matches, is there a way for us to also set aside the pension liabilities that we project and the class and compensation implementation so that it doesn't show up as available?
Going slightly back,
Yeah.
the $2 million that we set aside last year, we requested it to set aside for class and comp study as well as pension liability costs. It's not included in the $4 million, but we are showing it as something that is, the city still has the funding. So it's showing above the line, along with the reserve, the unexpended amount, and maybe I'm misunderstanding your question.
No, I understand. I guess what I'm saying is because we're looking at that $4 million as available, when in reality, we need to set aside pension obligations and the class and compensation implementation out of that $4 million. And I guess it would be beneficial for me and council and maybe even the community to know that there isn't a full $4 million there.
What I'm hearing is that the $2 million was set aside via Resolution 2023-077.
Right.
And that is not included in the $4 million.
So this is on top of the $4 million. We already have that $2 million set aside. We're not using it, and we're not proposing to use it, keep it for next year, for the next 2 to 5 years for class and comp implementation that results the deficit next year. Also for UAL increases. Right now, in the current year's budget, the UAL cost is approximately $7.6 million. It's projected to increase to $11 million in 2030 fiscal year. So that is approximately $3.5 million.
So let me be more clear, because I obviously am clear as mud right now. Future years of implementation and pension obligation would come out of this because of the projected deficits in the 5 years. Is that correct?
So we have set aside $2 million.
We set aside $2 million, but Is
It's
that
only,
per-
it will cover 1 year, basically.
Thank you.
You're
That's what
correct.
I'm trying to say. The 2 million
Yes.
is for 1 year.
1 year only.
But we have increases that will
Every year.
compile because
Right.
the way we implemented our class and comp and the way that pension obligation comes in, it raises
That is
normally.
correct.
So, my question is again, future years of class and comp and pension obligation come out of that 4 million because we're projecting deficits
That is
in
correct.
future budgets.
That is correct. We have many needs and we are projecting the deficit.
Thank
We
you.
have implemented many programs that essentially did create that deficit. We are doing the sidewalk snow removal, for example, which is partially funded by Measure S fund. And it is possible to adjust operations in the subsequent years. However, if we do want to continue implementing City Council strategic priorities in subsequent years and bridge that gap, we do need additional funding to be set aside in addition to $2 million.
So based on that, is there a way for us to set aside the amounts that we know we'll need or we think we'll need, is probably a better way?
Yes, the
Okay,
City Council.
so it doesn't show as an available 4 million for us to spend?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
There could be additional
We
funding
could do
set
that.
aside, yes.
Okay, then my next question, and I don't know if this is a you question or a Heather question, but on the fund balances for Measure S, is there a way to set a policy for how those fund balances can be used? For instance, these are just examples, for Fire Station 3 rebuild or to go into road maintenance, either one of those. Is there a way that we can set a policy that does that?
Yes, council could set a policy for spending those dollars.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? Ms. Cregan, no? Mr. Robbins, no questions, just comments? We'll come back for. Great. And Mr. Friedrich, online, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Great, thank you. I have a couple. Let's see, going into participatory budgeting, and I know we didn't include that in the slides here. I'm just curious what those projects are. I know that we looked at that a few meetings ago. It just wasn't there. And I guess I support 100% the participatory budgeting process, but I looked at it as more data for the council to make those choices, not necessarily that 200 people or whoever, how many participated in the budget really make that choice. So I just would like to know.
I got you. So it's $1 million to 3,900 Lake Tahoe Boulevard housing project, 500,000 from Measure S, making up the total of 2 million for road rehab. So there's 1.5, and the remaining 500,000 was 250,000 for Regan Beach improvements, and 200,000 for Johnson Boulevard, and 50,000 for the road safety audit, city's portion of implementing safety signs on US 50.
Okay, so I guess we'll bring that back a little bit for discussion when we come back, because for me, I'm not sure that I'm in full agreement with that. Okay, so we're looking at the $2 million for set aside, and we just spoke a little bit about that we have in this future budget. We didn't touch it last year. Looking forward, there's a chance that we have to touch it, but I always go back to our 25% reserve that's at 14.8 million, knowing that we do have city code restricting some of the uses on that. However, even during Caldor Fire, the largest disaster and major financial implications on the city, we didn't even touch that 14.8. And I sometimes don't like to see money sitting at City Hall when we have so many needs that it could be going towards, knowing that in the largest disaster we've ever had, we never even hit the 25%. So looking at going forward, and let's say we allocate that 2 million to something, and then it really does come true that we're in this 2 million. You spoke a little bit about, possibly having to cut other parts of the city budget. If we look at the kind of projections that are happening, a lot of that is kind of dependent on if the economy goes bad, if things were to happen. And would our city code not allow us in an economic downturn to access that reserve?
There are specific uses that city code dictates and processes when city council can utilize that 14.8 million. it's again recommended that not more than 25% of that committed reserve is utilized. And we also shouldn't be using it to balance the budget. So our deficit is a result of slow revenue growth and high expenditures increases. We are still being very cautious, and the budget only includes 15% for liability increase. However, this year, or the last couple of years, the liability insurance has increased by 30%. So even though we are, our budget does not include any even revenue declines. However, we know that expenditure increases are real, and it's still on a very cautious, almost conservative side, not create a huge deficit when we have to cut half of the city's budget. So utilizing the reserves, committed reserves, to balance the budget will not be possible. If a one-time event happens, or if a major nationwide economic recession happens, when we know that we are losing 20-30% of our revenue, annual revenue, that's what city code states. That's when we can utilize those reserves. Otherwise, as Council Member Wallace mentioned, we need more, not less.
But we can, though, so, and that was, you answered my question. In a major national economic downturn, we do have the ability to access that to make up the loss. And for me, that's, and because, or also, for instance, our pension expenditures coming way up, or the class and comp, and all of a sudden we don't have the money for that, we still do have the ability to access that reserve in that situation.
That is correct.
Okay.
If CalPERS has 20-40% loss, then our unfunded liability will go up by several $1 million. It's not stagnant. It can change next year. Next year, it could be 20% investment earnings instead of a loss. But for one-time expenditures, that's where the reserves can be utilized.
Great, thank you. And then my only other question, and this may be for Chief Stevenson, and again, I 100% support the police department, but looking at our 5-year projections, that department incrementally rises around $750 a year as we watch other departments to project to lower the expenditures they're going to have. And I'm just wondering exactly why, usually police and fire kind of stay close, and fire is projected to come down, and police is projected to come way up. And I'm just wondering what that's about.
I can explain that. So police and fire, each of those departments include their own unfunded liability amounts. So it's approximately $3 million for police and maybe 2.5 for fire, something like that. However, all other departments do not include unfunded liability. Unfunded liability for all miscellaneous groups is included under miscellaneous general fund category. So that's why the miscellaneous general fund category is increasing every year by a significant amount. And police and fire each also increasing every year by a significant amount. But other departments have a smaller decreases over the years. Fire department, very interesting. Expenditures in the fire department are supposed to be decreasing or increasing at a slower pace, because in the current year's budget and the next year's budget, there is a grant, SNPLMA grant, $870,000 that is included. That will expire in 2 years. So last year was the first year, the current year is the second. Next proposed budget year is the third year, and then it falls off. So that's why expenditures are going down comparatively speaking.
Great, makes sense. Thank you so much, Ms. Tikamirova. Really great. I think with that, we'll go ahead and move on to public comment, unless there's any questions from council, or do you want to? After? Okay. So we will open up public comment in the room. Anybody in the room? Mr. Messina.
Not certain this is the proper forum, but the budget has allocations for the bicycle trails, the homeless, and many other special interest groups, but it pretty much ignores 30% of our population consisting of seniors. And after the Caldor fire, the seniors need some assistance in removing trees and making their homes fire safe. And I'd like to see something in this budget to help them out. It could be administered by the fire department. It not only helps the seniors, it would help make the entire city safer from fires in the future. The city should actually have somebody on a representative here for the seniors, like they do the bicyclists and the homeless and all these other groups. I don't understand why they're not represented. But a couple $1 million of discretionary money could make a big difference, not just for them, but for the entire city. They can't afford to $1,000 a tree, they can't afford to make their homes fire safe. I don't know how to go about creating this, but something in the budget should put some money aside to help them out, I think. They're 30% of our population, and they get only table scraps out of our budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Messina. Anybody else in the room that would like to give public comment on item 5? All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and move to Zoom.
Yeah, we'll open up our Zoom platform for anyone who wants to provide public comment. I do see one hand raised. Ms. Reagan.
Hi, this is Angie Regan from Access Tahoe, and just wanted to second that the seniors are fairly neglected in this town, and it's a hard place to live when you're elderly, and that includes just inclusion and activities and socialization at the senior center. And I've shared this before, just the lack of activities, and I just confirmed just online, just bingo, bridge club, and dominoes or cards, dominoes and bingo are kind of what the offerings are. I do appreciate the Silver Striders walk. I think that's really awesome. And I also understand that the senior center is under the county, but the building is the city's. And so a senior that I sat with at lunch one day just said how institutional it is in there and how depressing it is. And just, I've suggested in the past and just possibly doing like an indoor mural or something to brighten up the space or bring it kind of up to 2024 would be great. Thank you.
There are no additional public comments at this time, Mayor.
Great. All right, so we will bring it back to council. We are actually going to take a small break. It is 11:21. This time we'll do 9 minutes and come back at 11:30.
Okay, Mayor, we're ready to get going whenever you are.
All right, so we will, Mr. Robbins, we'll go ahead and call this meeting back to order. Never use that.
It's fun.
Yeah, right? Nice. Let's see, Mr. Irvin is coming. All right. We'll go ahead and call this meeting back to order. We are now in comments and discussion, and we'll be looking for a motion. So I'll bring it back to council. I don't have anybody on my screen. Anybody want to
And then
bring this up?
let me press buttons to get on your screen, or just.
All right,
I have-
Mr. Robbins, go for it.
Yeah, so for Ms. Timarova, one of the things that I've noted in some of these analyses is we have a number of revenue sources with like lookbacks, where we're looking at the last several years worth of revenue. We do this for the TOT, for example, to look back at how much revenue is collected from various sources. But none of those have been indexed to a constant dollar amount. So, we received 16 million in spare change, I think it was 6 years ago from TOT, and now we receive a lot more. But how much more is that in terms of what is in economics terms is referred to as real dollars? That is dollars adjusted by an appropriate inflation index. Because the value in terms of what we can buy, a city can buy today for the same dollar amount is less than what we could buy for the same number of dollars 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 5 years ago. I will note that the bicycle JPA recently just updated, this was an effort I moved forward with them, recently just updated their revenue analysis so that when they're reporting revenue collections, they are reporting those collections both in raw dollars and also in current constant dollars, that is, dollars adjusted by an appropriate inflation metric. They chose the California Construction Cost Index as an inflation metric, which is highly relevant for the bicycle JPA that spends money on building parks and building park infrastructure and maintaining bicycle trails and things like that. My question is, have we given any consideration to, or would it be sensible to give consideration to looking at assessing revenue, past revenue collection reports, and then producing those reports and showing them both in raw dollars but also in inflation adjusted constant dollars? And then I guess the question would be, have we given any thought to what inflation index that would be? Because generally for the public, we think in terms of consumer price index, that when I think of what my salary today buys versus what my salary 10 years ago buys, what am I buying? Groceries and rent and washing machines and whatever else. And so that's consumer price. I'm not sure if there's an appropriate index. There might be a more appropriate inflation index for government spending, because government spends most of their money on things like people. And there are inflation indices that are appropriate. That there's employee cost index, there's the California Construction Cost Index, but I'm not sure if there's something particularly appropriate for government expenditure indices. Though there might be. I haven't had a chance to look at it. But my suggestion or request would be that the next time we go through this, so that we can look at past revenues and understand the real value versus the raw dollar value of those revenues and compare them to today, that we adjust those past dollars. You report the raw dollars, of course, but say that is the equivalent of so many dollars in today's money, in an inflation index that is appropriate for government expenditures.
We can look into it, Councilmember Robbins, for next year's budget. We started looking, we briefly talked about it last year, and or maybe during the last 12 months, and we tried to get some idea how it might work. Unfortunately, it was too time consuming, and we got carried away with many other projects, but I'll put it on my list if that's what the preference of City Council, to have the presentation in this format, and we can definitely present it in the next year's budget, or maybe even earlier if we get.
Yeah, I guess that was going to point to my question. Would this be, and I think similar to somewhat what you were speaking about before, Mr. Robbins, is this a change to the accounting procedure council has approved for you to do? And if so, do we not need to bring that back as a full discussion to get council approval on? I guess that's for Mr. Irving or Ms. Tikamarova.
Yeah, I mean, I see the value of your question. I'm not saying it's a bad idea at all. I don't know if it's directly a budgeting tool. And so for the purpose of our budget, I would say it's not a priority. But as we look at our economic health of our community, that's probably something we could try to work on with the finance director and myself and our assistant city manager to show that metric on our strategic plan dashboard. We could put our heads together as time allows.
Yeah, and I mean, particularly like we make public reports, for example, of TOT revenue over time. And it would be valuable, I think, to show that not just the raw dollar collection, because you always want to show the hard dollars, but to show what is the value, what is the real value, which is the inflation adjusted value. And the other question that we started getting into was showing the rollover, the past year rollover as an input. It's not technically a revenue, but showing that as an available money pot. It is in a sense a revenue from last year's payment into this year, but then showing that as an appropriate line item so that shows as accounted in the annual budget, because we have the total revenue in, the total expenditure out, but it's not showing money rolled in from last year in the general the general plan. And I think that would be the question is, does that meet appropriate general accounting practices?
We can make a presentation so it's more clear for
Yeah.
anyone to understand where those amounts are coming from versus showing just as a deficit. For us, and as I explained usually during the budget presentation, we are using the excess reserves from the prior years. And I just pulled, for example, historical information from 2019 or 2020. Starting with 2020, we had $3.6 million twice in surplus. So that got built up. So it's not just 1 year from the previous year when we're using those surpluses. It's from the several years before when we anticipated maybe usage of those deficits, but we ended the year with budget savings due to salary savings or any other reasons.
Right, so showing the accumulation of excess funding from preceding years as I don't know if you necessarily want to call it a revenue type. In a sense, though, it is a revenue. It's revenue from the previous year. And I think that would be an appropriate way to display that in the budget here, because that is part of the reason there really isn't going to be a $6.121 million deficit in the colloquial sense, in the public's understanding of what that means, because you're going to have excess funds from previous year be available to pay for some of that this year, meaning that the amount of actual deficit may not be there in that amount or at all, but that's not clear in the chart.
We can make the change to present how we present it, absolutely.
Yeah, my only caution, and I trust Olga's opinion on that, is that there's no broken issue here. So, what problem are we solving other than a visual portion as part of our presentation? So that's what I'm hearing. I just want to make sure you're good with that. We're not changing our accounting practices, but for presentation purposes, we will show that as a carryover. It makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Mr. Robbins, Ms. Wallace.
So this question is for council. Is there a appetite for setting a policy to use the fund balance of Measure S for Fire Station 3 or road maintenance, or so that we have a set policy, so when we have, like this year, I believe it's $2+ million?
We started the year with
so it's
2.8 million.
okay.
We already used about 1.6 of it.
Perfect. So whatever the balance is, that we just automatically switch that over to Fire Station 3 improvements so that we have to bond less.
I would say yes, very much, because that's a council priority that we're just solidifying. But I guess my question goes to budgeting versus appropriating.
Really quick, Councilmember Wallace, the comment on that policy idea that you just brought up, it would probably help for 1 year, is my guess, because we're going to be ready to start going out to bid within 18 months, probably, for tune of $18 million project with $2 million cash is what our estimate is right now.
But you're talking about Fire Station 3. And
Just
I'm
for
talking
Fire
about
Station
for
3.
Fire Station 3 and/or road maintenance, that we just automatically, because that's part of what can be spent out of Measure S, what we have allocated as being the items.
More long-term policy, that's where I wanted to differ between the two. So,
I
yeah.
guess just to go back, since for your question, back to council, I mean, I think we would want to bring that back as kind of a full item to kind of discuss. For me, I fall a little more on the different side of it. I think that, I do hear you if it's just automatic to roads. Like, I think that's great. I'm not of the mindset of let's hold more money in City Hall in case things happen.
No.
I want to make sure that we're using the money we have to use, so that's why I think let's bring it back, like, for a longer discussion.
That's sort of the point I'm trying to make, though.
I get that, yeah, because you're saying let's just automatically have it go to road.
Transfer it over to
Right.
road maintenance,
And
or
I guess the only
whatever we
question-
decide as a council.
Right, the only question becomes is we have this workshop in our mid-year, which is kind of always where we can make that call. So anyways, let's bring it back, is I think the thing to do with that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Wallace?
Yes. Chief Drennan, can you talk about, please, well, first I'll make a comment, that we have a council appointee to the Commission on Aging. His name is Keith Roberts, and if we have elderly or seniors that need help, that's sort of the pathway through from the community to the council, or just standing at the podium and telling us what you want. I don't hear a lot about the needs of seniors until today. But Chief Drennan, could you please talk about the chipping service that the city does for those defensible space so that we can get that word out?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the things I actually didn't bring up during my presentation was on the fuel side, we have a chipping crew as well as D-Space inspectors that are all grant funded as well. On the chipping side, what is being offered to the community, more or less from state line to the summit, is free curbside chipping. We're not doing yard work per se, so we'll do very minor assistance at the property, but if material is brought to the curb, we chip it on site. We'll either leave it for the homeowner if they prefer, or we will haul it, and all of which is at zero cost. Speaking more to the issue of defensible space and what those costs might look like, both the fire marshal and the fuels division chief are looking into grant possibilities, but the magnitude of scale to pay for tree removal citywide is probably the city budget. That's a heavy lift. We're also very mindful of how we're doing those inspections so that we're not leveling major costs to homeowners when it's not necessary.
Are you aware of the program through Habitat for Humanity that operates up here? They don't build homes, but they'll go into seniors' yards and do maintenance on their house and their yard. And so that might be a pathway for funding for tree removal and things like that for people who are unable to pay for it themselves, especially seniors. I believe that Habitat for Humanity program works specifically with seniors. I've sent people to that before.
Okay, I'll definitely speak with you offline on that one.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wallace. Ms. Cregan.
Thank you. I actually had on my list to ask you about the chipping program also. And I did want to note that Chief Kim George, she's been looking at grant programs, I know, for this, in particular for those who cannot pay for the tree removal because it is very expensive. So I know that the fire department has been on that for a long time as part of the defensible space, and that it is a big deal and that we are paying attention to it. And I wanted to just say thank you for the budget presentation. That was really good. And I wanted to note that Public Works, Fire, and Police, -1, all just stood up here today and told us that our city is fully staffed with our most crucial departments that our city wants. And I think that that's really, really important. And I know that the changes that I've seen since I've been sitting up here to all of these departments is really impressive. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cregan. Great point. Mr. Robbins.
Yeah, I'd also like to see a discussion come back on the, because this is about, I think this is a correct point that this was a correct point that this is about budget, not necessarily about allocation. So I would like to see an agenda item come back on the spending of the excess reserve. I agree with Cody that I think, there's a certain amount that we need to keep in reserve, but holding money and hoarding it is not necessarily in the public's interest in the long term. And I think there are a number of different priorities where those one-time type of funds could be very, very useful in terms of supporting long-term investments. One mention was roads, but another avenue for that funding might be a residential area plan. It is currently illegal to build modest duplexes in most of our residential communities. We've heard over and over and over again from the private sector, from the real estate, from the building organizations, from the building groups here, that modest housing doesn't pencil out. And one way to make it pencil out is to allow modest duplexes in residential areas. We allow McMansions and mushroom houses that are humongous, but we don't allow duplexes that are smaller. And in order to change that, will cost about $1 million in terms of an area plan, in terms of the CEQA review, because that requires that type of environmental study. And that is about $1 million expenditure, but it is a one-time expenditure that then allows the private sector to build, allows them the ability to build modest housing, which is something we've said is an approach we want to do. So I think that is another alternative use of one-time funds, or at least part of those one-time funds, that I want to make sure is in the mix for consideration. So I'm keen to bring that issue back, and I agree with it. I don't want it to be particular to one set of expenditures. I would like the discussion on expenditure options, and I don't necessarily think it's the right thing to do to make it an automatic expenditure on a particular thing. I think it's something that should be when we have a surplus, we should consider the needs of the city in that time, and then allocate the funds based on the needs. I don't necessarily think we want automatic expenditures like that, but I would like to see that discussion come back for allocation, given that right now the discussion is the money in, and we would want to discuss how we can go about spending that. So I think that should be its own agenda item.
Yeah, or I think too, could we not couple the two, because they're pretty aligned in a way, so we have one discussion around both of them, because it really kind of.
Absolutely, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I would just like to point out that Measure S can only be used for certain things, and that's why I was saying specific things for the Measure S leftovers. So, but there.
Measure S funding is really
That was
broad.
my question. I just want to clarify. There's two issues being talked about here. One, it started off as some kind of policy that automatically takes the fund balance from Measure S and puts it into roads or Fire Station 3 is what this started with. We need some clarity on that. Is it just Measure S that council wants us to come back with?
I guess my position was that I think you could have the discussion as one discussion and one agenda item on a future city council meeting, and you don't have to do two items, because I think they're kind of closely aligned, and then we can decide at that point when we have a full staff report and have, and have the ability to make that decision.
Are
And it
you
doesn't.
clear with that?
Yeah, that's fine. We understand. We have clear direction on that. If the council wants us, we can come back with that. No
So
worries.
it'll be a generalized discussion, not specific to automatic.
It'll be both.
Yeah, it'll include both Measure S and general fund.
Because Measure S is separate.
Because it does.
Sorry, yes.
We are
Sorry,
very
sorry.
transparent with what Measure S is spent on based on what we told the voters
it
would
can be a
spent on.
combination of Measure S and general funds, but generic in the sense of how we would want to spend that, rather than an agenda item on, do we want to do an automatic spending in some particular way?
That
But
would be
general-
the
That would be the
conversation.
conversation.
We'll
Okay,
have it as
good.
both.
Great.
Awesome. All right, Mr. Robbins, you good to go? All right, Mr. Friedrich, anything that you would like to add to the comment?
Not at the moment, nope.
Thank you so much. All right, for me, I do have a couple things. I want to go back real quickly to the participatory budgeting. For me, again, I think it's great that we do participatory budgeting, and it definitely gives us data around a survey from a few hundred of our residents, and I think something that we shouldn't ignore by any means, but sometimes it's our job as council, why we've been put up here is to also make these decisions. And so for me, it wasn't an automatic when we did participatory budgeting that we just went with the results of the survey. I am excited for 3900, 3908. We made big action when we ended Loop Road to open that up for some affordable housing development. But I also sometimes look at our commitments out of our budget over the last few years to housing, which are great, and I don't say that we should stop. But when I look at this project, I think that the $1 million that the developer needs to bring it out of the ground, there's other avenues than the city. The largest employers in our town, Barton, Vale, the casinos, those I would imagine are looking for affordable housing opportunities, and partner with, the developer partnering with one of those folks that gets, deed restrictions that it can only be Barton employees or it can only be Heavenly employees, and they look for their $1 million there, to me is something that I think makes a lot of sense and allows us to take the $1 million and put it into something like roads that we know we're massively underfunded in. We know how many levels and miles of roadways that we need to continue to repair that are a little bit more, I think, of our wheelhouse than necessarily supporting a private affordable housing developer, essentially, in bringing that project out of the ground. And again, I would encourage those larger employers in our town to reach out, and maybe we can definitely help facilitate and bridge the gap in that. But again, knowing that housing, and again, I'm not saying it's not our priority and a major priority. I just wonder if it is the best use of $1 million when things like housing, things like roads are very underfunded and really need more funding. So I would just open that up, I guess, as a question to council around kind of some opinions there, yeah.
So I don't disagree with everything you said. The only thing that I'm concerned about is that we used $2 million, I believe, roughly, to leverage about $100 million for Sugar Pine. And I'm not certain that a private developer without the backing of the city could do that without us. And that was at least my thoughts on that. It looks like Mr. Thomas has something to say, and I want to hear it.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council can speak to that. So how it works with Sugar Pine and often developments like this is that match often needs to come from the kind of the local jurisdiction. And so that's just often how the funding sources are structured. That's not to say that we couldn't do outreach with private partnerships for some kind of housing fund or things like that. Certainly that's been discussed. Certainly that's a good thought. But from the standpoint of applying for the grants, the tax credits, things like that, often the match, like Sugar Pine, has to come from the city kind of through that. That's just the mechanism by which these funding sources kind of recognize, because they view it as kind of a dedicated source that, for example, a city council can dedicate towards the project. So it really kind of needs that linkage there. And just wanted to provide that clarification.
Great. I guess so for this project, are we looking at even the availability of things like Project Home Key and the things that we were able to leverage, using $2 million to leverage $100 million? Because I thought this is going to also have some commercial square footage on the bottom, right? There's going to be some retail space. Is that correct? And I haven't looked at this exact proposal in a long time.
That is correct. So the funding sources for the housing project at 3900 will be very similar to how Sugar Pine worked. It'll use a combination of tax credits, grants, things like that. Some of that is already underway. We actually have some new funding sources that have kicked in with our pro housing designation. We have significant money coming from that. Regarding the commercial component, the council at the time directed if that's possible to look into that. The pre-development phase is currently underway with the design. Right now, it's looking like it will not have necessarily the commercial development. It will see how that can pencil out. It's not totally off the table, but right now it's really looking at kind of just a residential project, approximately 75 units. So, but yeah, absolutely. The financing structure will be very similar to what you've seen with Sugar Pine.
And then I guess last question, you may not know this because they're kind of coming to my mind right now, but with looking at something like a large employer, is it possible in these kind of Sugar Pine type projects to deed restrict it so long as they meet the affordable or whatever the metrics are that come out of the state, but that it only can be an employee of a said organization so long as they're matching up with what is known as affordable?
So if you use, Mayor, the outside funds, such as I pointed out, the grants, tax credits, things like that, both at a federal and state level, you typically are not allowed to restrict kind of the user of it. You can restrict the income. Sometimes it's, designated towards seniors, veterans, things like that. Those are defined within the structure of those funding sources. But the user, for example, a certain employer, typically cannot be restricted if you use those funds.
That kind of ends this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is there something precluding, if the money needs to come out of the city's budget, is there something precluding a large employer from making a donation to the city and then us creating that funding out of the city budget and that complying with the grant requirements?
We can definitely take donations from large employers. And I think to Mr. Thomas's question there, or last answer regarding our compliance requirements to Fair Housing Act, they would slightly be loosened up because of the source of the color of that money, perhaps. Is that fair, Zach?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, Mr. Irvin. And to my point earlier, that's something that staff would be happy to explore. Some kind of partnership, funding arrangement, things like that. I would recommend going in that direction rather than a direct funding, per Mr. Irvin's point, kind of the color of the money.
Okay.
So I think that would be a better arrangement. We're happy to kind of bring that back at a future date for discussion, absolutely.
And then last question on this item, do you see that $1 million, or if we do decide to go forward with that $1 million to that, do you think that that'll be expended by mid-year budget in the next 6 months? Or do you know that maybe you don't know?
Currently, Mr. Mayor, we're in the process of doing the tourist core area plan amendments. The council recently approved. That's working its way through TRPA, and that's part of the overall entitlement process. We're anticipating that to occur probably by December, January. That's getting close to the mid-year budget, so probably would not be expended by then. However, it could be encumbered by then. So an agreement such as a pre-development loan agreement or some kind of other loan agreement could be arranged in that time. Whether or not it would physically be expended is kind of not known. But very similar to the pre-development loan, like an agreement could encumber the money, for example.
Great. Okay, I guess with that, I'm okay just leaving with, and then at mid-year budget, we can kind of look at this. But I do and would like to direct the staff that go ahead and head down the road of looking for our largest employers, Barton. There's a few of them in the room today. Let's see who is out there. I know housing for them is a major issue, and there may be something that we can make a partnership on there. So let's see, moving on to the $2 million that we're going to hold back. That is basically for projections that we may be 2 million short in the next coming years. Again, for me, I think that as I spoke about earlier, we have 14.8 million in a reserve fund, 25% reserve. We have made moves in 2021 that is, holding back grant requirement money. Even before we get the grants, we're holding back the money. So we've built in a lot of safeguards and a lot of things to me that I think really protect us in such a thing of an economic downturn, or looking back to Caldor, evacuating our town for 9 days and losing a lot of revenue for 60 to 90 days, and we never even touched that 14.8 million in that time. It seems to me holding back another 2 million is not, of what Mr. Robbins said, of the best public interest, when we know things like road repair, To me, seeing as many porta potties that we have in public parks and places where not only our health and safety concerns, but also VMT with having porta potty trucks having to come and empty those, the vehicle mile travel that is associated with every single porta potty throughout the city, we should look at making the commitments to replacing those with full-time permanent bathrooms that also don't cost the city's budget annually to have those porta potties serviced. So those are little things to me that are important that I think we should be using all the money that we have. You know, in my 27 years in Tahoe, we have never had this competent of a staff, and I think that it's a great time to spend the money we have because of how competent our staff is in using it and delivering projects. So that's up to council, but I do think that allocating that $2 million is something that we should do. And maybe it's a discussion too that we look at it at mid-year, because we do have more projections to look back at mid-year and stuff like road repair. I could leave this to Mr. Najad. I don't know that even if we allocate it today that you're going to get much done by October 15th. Maybe so if we have a contractor on board, but yeah, that'd be a question for you.
So if the council appropriates $2 million, we probably can do it by next spring. And we can add it to the recommended budget for roadway rehab. So we can easily do $6 million to $8 million every year.
Where are we at right now? About 4.5 or where?
Our allocation is about 2.5 million from Measure S, 500,000 from SB1, and then we project to get about $1 million from in lieu fees. So we think it's going to be about 4.5 to $5 million for next year.
So yeah, we're 2 to 3 short from what our capacity would be. Okay, I'll bring it back to council just to discuss that.
I would be in favor of bringing back to mid-year a capital plan for restrooms at all parks, a plan that we can talk about and discuss. But I agree with you, mid-year might be the better place for it because we'll have more of an idea of what's happening this year with the economy and things like that.
Great, thank you, Ms. Wallace. Ms. Cregan?
I agree completely with that approach.
Great, Mr. Robbins.
Yeah, I'm not sure that porta potties are my priority, but I mean, it is a valuable thing to do. I'm not sure. I think my proposed priority would be to say that we should legalize the building of affordable housing in all of our residential neighborhoods, which is currently not the case. Most of our neighborhoods, it is not legal to build a modest, affordable duplex, and that will cost $1 million. And I understand, I completely get the interest in the roads. I think we need to be spending a lot more money on there. The challenge is that the challenges in this discussion is about allocating transient 1-year surplus money to a problem that needs ongoing, long-term, predictable, steady funding. Because we need almost, in order to fix, right now we're on a path that it's going to take almost 50 years to fix the roads at the current rate of funding. And adding an additional $1 million this year will help pave a mile or so of extra road, but it's not really going to take the kind of real steps towards shortening the time that it will take to repair the roads. Whereas something like a residential area plan to legalize modest housing is a one-time expense that then has ongoing, continuous, indefinite benefits to the community in terms of freeing up the private sector to have the option to build that kind of modest housing. So I just want to make sure, I want to make sure that when we discuss this, that we are discussing all options, that we're not becoming, in terms of an agendized topic, over-focused on one particular set of spending. And I think we want to have the range of options to consider. And I'm very, it's not that I don't think we need a lot more money on the roads, but this is one-time money on an ongoing expense. And we should be thinking about raising funding for things like roads that are continuous, ongoing sources of funds. Otherwise, we're just sort of doling out bits and pieces here to try to add a mile here or a lane mile here and a lane mile there. Whereas there are other ways of spending it that have ongoing, and in fairness, right, the things like improvements to park infrastructure is an example of that, right? You build proper restroom infrastructures at parks. That is an ongoing savings that you then save indefinitely. And that is an example of one-time spending, which I think is the right way for me to think about how to use this fund. So it's not that I think that's the wrong thing to spend, that it is the wrong type of spending. I think that's the right type of spending we should be focused on for this.
And again,
It's not necessarily my priority, but I think it's the right type of spending.
I would say, yeah, with the housing thing, I think both of them, I do agree that mid-year, let's bring it back at mid-year. We have a better perspective at that point. And also at mid-year, what happens with this $1 million at 3,900 and 3,908? That is a housing bucket essentially. And maybe we move that from, if it's possible, to an area plan. I think the other thing that you should look at is TRPA. Always these area plans and what's going to be possible is always going to have to be approved by TRPA. So sometimes that's the first avenue for us. Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
Zach, Zach, if we were to appropriate the $1 million or however much it would be for the residential area plan, which is on our strategic plan, just a little further down, does your staff even have the capacity to do that right now, considering we're in the middle of 2 other area plans?
Right now, what I would recommend, council, is that we complete the Midtown area plan. That's a very significant effort. And kind of the first time that Midtown area has been, that's going to be a new area plan. And I think that will educate us, the council, everyone a lot as to the process, and will help lay the groundwork to what we want to do for the TRPA. I think there's a benefit there. I think with 3,900, the $1 million will go a long way to, as you point out, leveraging those outside sources. There is a general sense that some additional local funding will be necessary for 3,900. Obviously needs outstrip resources, as always. But my recommendation would be to focus on the residential area plan right after the Midtown area plan. That's kind of in our internal work plan. Based on,
If I may, thank you, Zach.
Yeah.
And just to answer your question, the answer is no, we don't have the staff to accommodate it now.
That's the short answer.
It took us a long time to get a senior planner to manage the Midtown plan, and so, yes, Zach dove in a little deeper, but we don't. If we dumped that on our lap right now, we would not be able to do it. And the other thing I want to, we've never had a policy discussion about the residential area plan per se. It's just been something that's added to our strategic plan. You know, we recently experienced a little hiccup with our TVAP, increased densities outside of town centers. And so that's a question that we would want to have, to the mayor's point. What is TRPA's appetite for ultimately approving an area plan? So something we need to think about before we embark on $1 million endeavor. Not saying we shouldn't do it, but it's a reality that they ultimately have to approve our area plans.
Great, thank you, Mr. Irvin and Mr. Thomas, appreciate that. We'll come back to you. Let me just check in with Mr. Friedrich. Mr. Friedrich, any questions, or excuse me, any comments?
Yeah, this all sounds like good mid-year budget discussion. I would just say that I strongly support expending the $1 million now for potential leverage of the Loop Road housing project. I think it's important to remember how we got here, and this has been a long journey, and we've seen in Sugar Pine the benefits of having that money available when needed to leverage. I think I'm hearing the same from all of you, so I won't belabor the point, but I support staying the course on those funds.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Friedrich. Coming back, Mr. Robbins.
Sorry, I forgot to ask about this when I had the floor. On the question of grants for the 3,900 project, one of the challenges of leveraged grant funding for Sugar Pines, as I understood it, is that those grants tend to come with strings that require the housing be restricted to low and very low income, or principally restricted to low and very low income units. Would the same be true for the 3,900, the proposed 3,900 project? If we're doing grant-based funding, that would then, for the most part, not be available to income earners like teachers and nurses who would earn too much, for example, for Sugar Pines? Would that be a similar situation for that for that proposed development as well?
That is correct. It would be for most likely 60% AMI below, which is identified as low income, potentially up to moderate income, 80% AMI and below.
So if there was an interest in making sure that that housing was accessible to local teachers, nurses, full-time workers here in the community, then funding sources other than grants would need to be identified, or private funding, for that matter, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, that would be the likely case. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor, I just wanted to also point out that we have a deed restriction on that property because of the way it was done through the Surplus Lands Act that also restricts it to certain income levels. So that's already
To
been
what
done.
income levels? Achievable or low income? Because
It's-
those are different.
It's low and some percentage of low and I believe moderate. is in there, too.
Achievable is only a TRPA term.
Correct. That's why I was asking what the deed restrictions were, so.
I believe it went up to moderate for that requirement.
So the land deed restriction is that the housing can be used for up to moderate income.
That's my recollection.
What's
Yeah,
the
there's a
definition of moderate income?
There's a percentage of low and moderate
Yeah,
in the deed
it's a
restriction, and it's based on the HUD and HCD income levels.
And do we know, I guess maybe we don't have that handy offhand, but if, could you, if you have that, what are the thresholds for that? And if not, could you send me that offline?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, great. Bringing it back to council, I think we're ready for a motion. I think the only real direction excuse me, I didn't see your. Yep.
Thanks for letting me interrupt. Just want to recap some of the takeaways on direction we received. The finance director and myself will come back with a policy on surplus general funds and Measure S monies. There's this, Zach and I will put our heads together on potential private partners to support a housing project, see what appetite there is. And then this last one was about what I heard, Councilmember Wallace talked about capital plan for restrooms, but then it molded into broader discussion on other things. So I need some clarity on what the council wants with that.
I think a lot of that was really to come back at mid-year budget, right? We'll have a discussion at mid-year budget on what we want to do.
My understanding, Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager, is that we would come back at mid-year for the discussion for the first thing that you said.
Okay.
Where we talked about what policies we would set in place for overages on things.
Well,
so.
but that wouldn't be at mid-year budget. We'd bring that back as an item at a city council, probably before mid-year budget.
So the policy versus the expenditures.
Right, because
Okay,
we don't
I'm good
want
with that.
to, we don't
Yeah.
want to do that at mid-year budget, but just sometime, some city council meeting before mid-year budget.
sounds good.
We would have that. And then as far as the second one, though, talking about whether or not we want to spend $1 million on roads, out of that 2 million,
Yeah.
we were going to look at all of that at mid-year
mid-year.
budget. So
Okay.
that'll come back at mid-year budget.
Thank you for clarifying.
Of
That's all I
course.
needed.
Yeah,
All right.
And that will be inclusive of everything to the conversation.
course.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Well, so with that, I will look for a motion.
and you were going, was that the direction that you were going to
Yeah,
refer
yeah,
to?
Sorry.
Exactly,
Okay.
that was exactly it.
Okay, perfect.
That was perfect.
So I make a motion that we pass a resolution approving fiscal year 24-25 municipal operating and capital improvement program budget and $1 million set aside from the general fund assigned and designated excess reserves for affordable housing project at 3900-3908 Lake Tahoe Boulevard. And that I move that we pass a resolution approving fiscal year 24-25 list of allocated permanent positions, including new, eliminated, and reclassified. And given the direction already to staff, on any desired changes for the recommended budget, in which, never mind, that's it. Period.
I'll second.
Great. All right, we have a motion and a second. We can vote, and Ms. Blankenship, we will do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Friedrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Robbins.
Aye.
Councilmember Wallace.
Aye.
Councilmember Cregan.
Aye.
Mayor Bass.
Aye.
That motion unanimously carries.
Great. All right, with that, we'll move on to our agenda planning calendar, item number 6. Mr. Irving.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bass. Really just to highlight our next council meeting, September 10th, 9 a.m. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Right, great. Any council members on the APC? Seeing none. Mr. Friedrich, you're good?
Yes, good.
Great. With that, we will move on to updates and announcements, and we will start with Ms. Stroud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any at this time.
Great. Ms. Blankenship.
None at this time, Mayor.
All right, and Mr. Irvin.
Yeah, I only have a update on next, it was mentioned earlier, but next Friday, September 6th, is the ski run ribbon cutting ceremony. Next Monday is City Hall offices are closed for Labor Day. And then mark your calendars, all of you in the room and those watching from the computer or TV, September 17th is the State of the City address. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you, Mr. Irvin. With that, we'll move on to council member reports and comments, and I will start with Mr. Robbins.
Nothing at the moment.
All right. Ms. Cregan.
I just want to apologize for missing the last meeting and to say thank you for those of you who were here for giving my daughter a warm welcome for her presentation.
Awesome. Ms. Wallace.
So based on some of the public comment earlier, I am willing to put forth a high-level discussion on Heavenly with the codicil that there's probably nothing we can do for the parking agreement for this year. It's just too late in the year. But I would like to discuss it again. And I know that Ms. Cregan is not able to.
For me, I think we've made it very clear for the last year, and I think we've been waiting for a response for Heavenly to determine if they're willing to be part of the city. To me, we've had these discussions, we've sent letters back and forth. The ball is in their court, and I'd like to keep it in their court. And I'm not saying when they bring that letter to us, whether it's that they support it, they don't support it, I think that's the right time for the discussion.
To clarify, I didn't say just parking because I think it should be a whole discussion, including their willingness to support a portion or all of the annexation that we've discussed. And so just to clarify.
Yeah, and I'm really ready for the discussion, but I truly believe that it takes that letter, which we've just been waiting for over a year, and with basically not saying they don't understand it and these different things. But to me, I want to have that discussion, trust me, and it will be based on, we support this annexation, we only support it if it's the Cal Main Lodge parcel, and if that letter comes, well, then the discussion, we have it at that moment, and I'm ready for it. But they really need to tell us yes or no. Sorry, I might be going.
Yeah, I was getting ready to press my button just to remind you that's not on the agenda. Yes. So per our protocols, it would just be whether there's a second to bring back an item at a later meeting.
Let's go ahead and open it up to the rest of council real quick, if that's all right. All right, Mr. Robbins.
I'm not ready to have that conversation. I've yet to see movement on Heavenly's part to justify a second for that motion request. I have many of the same things I'd like to say as Cody did, but per the fact that this is only looking for a second and not a discussion, I will not second for a motion at this time for this conversation. We're not ready for that.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And Mr. Friedrich, would you like to comment on this item? Or, I'm sorry, excuse me, on the second request.
I appreciate the spirit of that, Ms. Wallace, but I kind of agree with Mayor Bass that the ball's in Heavenly's court. I think the parameters have been pretty clearly identified, and we should just let that process play out.
Great, thank you, Mr. Friedrich. All right, so with that, Ms. Wallace, anything else? Okay.
Mayor, I'm so sorry. Can I have a quick backseat? Sorry. As part of the city manager report, it came up during public comment as well, since we're talking about the public comment, that the porta potty up on Saddle Road. Just want everyone to know that that was not left over from the city's project. There was not one associated with the road paving project. Some other contractor dumped it there, but our public works department's determined that it's following up on it. So.
Great, thank you so much for the update. Mr. Friedrich, anything on the council member reports and comments?
Not at this time.
Thank you so much. All right, for me, I think we had the Tahoe Summit, which was really exciting to have Pete Buttigieg here and actually have a focus on transportation, which is very dear at my heart. I think it was a great summit all in all. We have TRPA tomorrow, and with that, we are adjourned.